وآمنوا منكم وعملوا الصالحات ليستخلفنهم في الأرض كما استخلف الذين من قبلهم وليمكنن لهم دينهم الذي ارتضى لهم وليبدلنهم من بعد خوفهم أمنا يعبدونني لا يشركون بي شيئا ومن كفر بعد ذلك فأولئك هم الفاسقون وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأطيعوا الرسول لعلكم ترحمون لا تحسبن الذين كفروا معجزين في الأرض ومأواهم النار ولبئس المصير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Abdullah. May Allah bless you, bless your family. Without further notice, I want to just give a short bio about our honored guest, inshallah. Brother Sami Hamdi is Managing Director of the International Interest, a global risk and intelligence company. He advises government, institutions, companies, and he advises government institutions, global companies, and NGOs on the geopolitical dynamics of Europe and Africa and the Middle East. He has significant expertise in advising on commercial issues related to volatile political environment and their implication on the market entry, market expansion, and management of the stakeholders. Sami is a frequent guest on many outlets, Al Jazeera, English and Arabic, Sky News, BBC, and other outlets. Our honored guest, Tafadhal, Jazakallah khair. It works? Yeah, you have to set. There's a button. Bismillah. Are you ready, Brother Sami?
Yes. Bismillah.
Bismillah. Jazakallah khair. So, our first question is actually based on the title that we gave to this conference, the Gaza impact and the awakening of consciousness in the world. Ihya al-Dhama'ir.
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Rasulullah. First of all, assalamu alaikum to everybody here. Jazakumullah khair for having me. Jazakallah everybody for giving me the time. And mashallah, this country is very big, mashallah. And your flight times are 3-4 hours, which is bigger than Europe, which has been quite an experience for me. I think that the direct answer to your question is that it's clear that Gaza has caused the Great Awakening. First of all, it's clear that there is a spirit in the Ummah that has suddenly emerged, which is now causing tectonic political shifts in the world in terms of public policy and public opinion. The first example of that is the clear shift in public opinion that we're seeing first in the Western world. For the first time, we're seeing people who were supporting Israel yesterday now supporting the Palestinians. There was a poll that came out on the 26th, 27 October, a Gallup poll, which was later affirmed by another poll that came afterwards, which suggested that Biden was falling behind his rivals in 6 or 7 swing states. Reuters reported that the fascinating thing about these polls was that Biden was falling in the polls not only because of the economy, but also because of his stance with regards to Palestine and Israel. And they said, the Republican and Democrat polls said, they said the shocking thing about these polls was that Biden was falling in the polls over an issue where American troops weren't even on the ground. The point being is that usually when a president is losing in the polls or falling in the polls, it's usually because American troops are dying abroad in Iraq or Afghanistan, and the American citizen is upset that their boys are dying and struggling with no real benefit coming from those wars. But the fascinating thing about these polls is that Biden is falling over an issue where American troops are not dying on the ground. Meaning what's causing the shift in public opinion is not a self-interest that people are concerned about the lives of their soldiers. What's making him fall in the public opinion is that people are genuinely changing their minds about an issue that they had very firm opinions on only yesterday. Those who were supporting Israel yesterday were now starting to stand with Palestine because they were now seeing the very real images of the atrocities and genocide and ethnic cleansing being live streamed on their screens. The point being is that while Israel was telling the world what was happening, the Palestinians were showing the world what was happening. And that broke Israel's monopoly on the narrative, especially given that the Muslims in particular, the 1.9 billion Muslims around the world, they rushed to amplify the voice of the Palestinians, which broke the algorithm of social media. For those who don't know, the algorithm is designed to show popular posts. So when something has billions of views, it naturally puts it at the top of the homepage. It naturally shows the video on TikTok and beyond. Meaning that social media, which bypasses mainstream media, which bypasses CNN, which bypasses BBC, which bypasses NBC and MSNBC and all these abbreviations you guys have for everything like Epic Masjid. When I was told about Epic Masjid, my first reaction was, that's a bit of an arrogant, brazen thing to say, like to call it an Epic Masjid. And everybody kept telling me Epic Masjid is epic. And then I only realized that EPIC was an abbreviation when I turned up to Epic Masjid and it said East Plano Islamic Center. And I went, oh, that's why. But then I realized I think somebody did it on purpose, to make sure that the abbreviations would be epic. But the point is that with all these abbreviations of these channels.
Iconic.
And Irving, of course, the reputation is, I think, #1 in Dallas, they say, apparently. MashaAllah. In any case, don't worry, when I go to EPIC, I won't say the opposite. But in any case. The point is that as a result of the social media which bypassed these channels, people are now seeing the truth of the matter that was happening, which resulted in Biden falling in the polls. And because Biden fell in the polls, what resulted is a policy shift in which Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, went from banning the State Department from using the word pause or ceasefire to rushing to Netanyahu in Tel Aviv and breaking all those climate change policies by burning the air miles in order for genocide and ethnic cleansing, because climate change and ethnic cleansing and genocide. But the point is, he went to Tel Aviv and he said to Netanyahu that we need to change the marketing strategy for genocide and ethnic cleansing. And Netanyahu was so frustrated that according to Axios, he told Blinken that I don't want to do this humanitarian pause unless I'm sure that it's not a trap by Biden to lure me into a ceasefire. The idea being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you think their hearts are united, but qulubuhum shatta, the hearts are divided. The point is that shift in policy in the American policy was brought about by an ummah that refused to be quiet, by an ummah that chose to move, by an ummah that chose to raise its voice, amplifying the voice of the Palestinians, breaking Israel's monopoly over the narrative by breaking the algorithm, which resulted in the message reaching new corners of the world, people who'd never heard the Palestinian voices, which resulted in them changing their minds on Palestine and Israel, which resulted in a shift in public opinion, which resulted in Biden falling in the polls, which resulted in the Democrats panicking and going to Netanyahu and saying, we can't keep committing genocide and ethnic cleansing in the manner that we'd like. We have to adjust the way we do it because the ordinary Muslim refuses to be quiet. And that's the point of this chain effect. And the reality is, even when you look at this chain effect, you see it even in the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in that the Prophet sallallahu in the first 13 years doesn't have an army, he doesn't have money, he doesn't have a media, but he keeps presenting his da'wah and calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which results in a public opinion shift. That means that Umar ibn al-Khattab leaves the army and the money and the media to go and join the weak and persecuted Muslims. Mus'ab ibn Umayr radiallahu anhu, who would go down the roads in Quraysh and you would smell his perfume, as a result of the shift in public opinion in Quraysh, where people were seeing that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that his message was correct, even though he didn't have an army or media or money, they left the elites of Quraysh to go and join these weak and persecuted Muslims. And that's what we're seeing today, in that the Palestinians don't have the army the way that Israel does. They don't have the money the way Israel does. They don't have the media the way Israel does. But as a result of the mobilization, or this great awakening, as you called it, we're seeing a shift that meant Blinken went to Israel and told Netanyahu that we need to shift from no ceasefire to humanitarian pause, to hostage truce, to sustainable ceasefire, to reports today that came out in Haaretz that there's a 2-month truce about to be announced between Hamas and between the Israelis. So the point here being is that the reality is, when we talk about this great awakening, there are many people who want to underplay the role that public opinion plays in the wider political game. But here you can clearly see a direct correlation between the loudness of your voices in speaking about Palestine and the impact that has at the highest levels. And the reason why I emphasize this particular point is that there's a reason why billions were spent to shadow ban accounts, to close down social media accounts, to shut down pages, to limit the reach of #Palestine, because the Netanyahu and Blinken identified a threat in these voices that needed to be contained, and that threat was so great that they needed to spend billions of dollars on that. But even though they spent billions of dollars on that PR narrative, the Ummah broke that narrative for free. And that's the point that I want to emphasize here. And when we're talking about this great awakening that's taken place, what we're seeing is that foreign governments are now having to adjust their policy because of the shift in public opinion. We saw Kamala Harris come out and she announced a program, the first in American history, she says, to counter Islamophobia. The reason that she introduced this program was not because she suddenly felt guilty about the Muslims or the like. The reason is because the Democrats got together and they said, there's a problem here. While it's true that Biden is behind his rivals in a number of swing states, the problem is the swing states that he's behind his rivals happen to be the states where the Muslims potentially have the deciding vote. Axios reported that if Biden loses, quote, even a sliver of the Muslim vote in any of these swing states, he loses. And Politico reported that if Biden loses 100,000 votes in Dearborn al-Mubarak, then he will lose Michigan completely. The point here being is that while many Muslims want to undermine the role of speaking out and public opinion, I remember one sheikh who stood next to me once, we had a talk, and he said, after I finished speaking and telling people, move ya ibadallah, speak loudly, he said, Sami wants to liberate the ummah via WhatsApp. But the point is that but the reality is that while many Muslims don't appreciate the value of their voice, the reality is that those who say the voice doesn't matter, those who say public opinion doesn't matter, are directly rejecting the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he said, "Ballighu anni walau ayah," convey from me even if it's just a verse. Many people want to read this hadith as a spiritual hadith in which when you hear it, you say, "Qul huwallahu ahad," and you feel good about yourself. But the emphasis in this hadith is on the walau, convey from me even if it's just a verse. What the hadith is saying is, if you do not have any power to advance the cause, if you do not have any ability to advance the cause, if you don't have an army or money or wealth or influence or any of these talents, then he said, don't be an ummah that's quiet. Don't be an ummah that does nothing. Don't be an ummah that doesn't mobilize. Convey from me even if it's just a verse. Be an ummah that raises its voice even if it doesn't have any other power to do anything else. And what we're seeing today is a manifestation of that hadith, in that when we're raising our voices and everybody said we don't have the power to stop the genocide and ethnic cleansing physically, but we will use the powers that we have within our means to try to make a difference. The Ummah took one step, Allah took 10 steps in accordance with the Hadith al-Qudsi, in which that voice was amplified to an extent that as a result of the decline in public opinion, Biden told Netanyahu in the 5th week of the genocide, according to CNN, that, quote, as a result of the bombardment of the videos of the atrocities being committed in Gaza, I can no longer support you in the way that you want. You don't have months, you probably only have a few weeks. And Eli Cohen, the Israeli foreign minister, said in the following day that we have only 2 weeks left before international pressure comes to bear down on us. We're seeing Macron come out call for a ceasefire. The Deputy Prime Minister of Belgium calling for sanctions on Israel. We're seeing Spain say it's ready to recognize a Palestinian state. We saw David Cameron today say we need an immediate ceasefire. We saw the Finnish foreign minister from Finland saying this self-defense is finished. This is now needs to end right now. We're seeing this shift that is taking place to such an extent that the Zionist writer in The Hill wrote that while Netanyahu may win the battle, Netanyahu has lost public opinion in such a way that he has caused permanent damage with our allies. And he writes, I fear that our allies will no longer come to our rescue in the manner they did before in future conflicts. The point here being, and to wrap up on this particular point, is when we talk about the Great Awakening is not just within the Ummah itself. The Great Awakening is amongst the world, where when you look at the polls, they show that a new generation of Americans, non-Muslims, no longer side with Israel, they side with the Palestinians. And that's because the Ummah that thought itself weak decided to manifest its power and roar, and they broke the algorithm. They broke Israel's monopoly on the narrative. And the reality is, and I'll finish on this particular point, when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam broke Quraysh's control over the narrative, when he spent those 13 years and shifted public opinion and caused ruptures in the foreign policy ties between Quraysh and Habasha, then Aus and Khazraj turned up 13 years later. They knew the Prophet ﷺ had no army. They knew he didn't have money. They knew he didn't have a media. They knew he was persecuted. But because of the shift in public opinion in Arabia, they agreed to give him their full support. The point being is, those underestimating public opinion know that the shift in public opinion is what creates the environment that creates new opportunities that leads eventually to the justice that you desire and that you seek.
Jazakallah khair, brother Sami. May Allah bless you. So, my next, brother Sami, is that I think you already talked about the help global-wise, but I want to explicitly say what Nelson Mandela said. We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestine. So, in your view, why is South Africa a pioneer in condemning Israel for genocide? Are there parallels between South Africa and the Palestinian cause?
I think, first of all, it's one of the greatest tragedies of modern times that we have how many Muslim states, and it took South Africa to bring the case to the ICJ in support of the Palestinians. And I think it's a terrible stain on the Muslim leaders and the Muslim nations, the idea that there is an Arabic saying, it's asadun alay wa fil hurubi na'ama, that my brother is a lion when he fights me, but he's an ostrich in war, in that he puts his head in the sand when he has to face somebody other than me. Regardless, I think South Africa deserves huge plaudits for bringing that case to the ICJ. And I think one of the reasons why it's significant that South Africa did it is because South Africa knows what apartheid feels like. It knows what apartheid looks like. So when it looks at Israel, it knows emphatically that it is an apartheid state. And it knows emphatically that what's happening to the Palestinians is almost identical to what happened to the blacks in South Africa, the way the whites used to persecute them, the way the whites used to make the blacks go through all these various different checkpoints, the way they would violate their rights and the like, and the way they would render them not second class or third class, but fifth class citizens. And I think that's why for South Africa in particular, they have a very strong affinity towards populations that have suffered something very similar to them. And that's why I think it's significant that South Africa did so. I also think, of course, that when it comes to South Africa as well, we're seeing this the world shift to become a new multipolar world as well. There are new orbits that are forming together. The US is no longer the hegemon that it once was, which allows the space for many of these nations to now manifest themselves more and more. But I think that when it comes to South Africa in particular, South Africa knows what apartheid feels like. It knows what genocide feels like. It put this case in the ICJ, and it started a domino effect in that Chile and Bolivia have launched their own case at the ICJ against Israel. Indonesia felt a bit of shame that a non-Muslim country did it, so they decided to put a case in the ICJ as well, against Israel as well. There's an ICJ ruling expected tomorrow for the South Africa case, tomorrow at the time of this recording. But the point is that they're expecting that maybe the ICJ will issue a temporary order that will suggest that there's enough grounds to indict Israel on genocide. There's deep concern. Netanyahu today met with his legal team. The US administration is concerned about the implications of being seen to be associated with a genocide in legal terms, which is why John Kirby came out and said that we haven't actually done investigation into whether Israel has committed war crimes, and that's to create plausible deniability. In case Israel is found guilty of genocide, the US can say we had no knowledge about it because we didn't investigate it or the like. Although now they're struggling today because there was the video yesterday that went viral that was caught by a Western media organization of a Palestinian holding a white flag, and the Israelis, they sniped him down instead. So I think Nelson Mandela was right. The freedom is not complete without the freedom of the Palestinians. Mandela had a very warm relationship with the Muslim world. Mandela, when he came to the US, when he was alive, they said to him, why do you have ties with Libya and Cuba and these other places as well? He said, we judge our relations based on those who acted to give us freedom, not those who gave us empty rhetoric. And I think that's what we're seeing here, in that South Africa knows that the Muslims played a very heavy role in the liberation of South Africa. They played a very prominent role in the liberation of South Africa. Mandela had a very warm affinity for the Muslims because the Muslims throughout history have always been the sanctuary for oppressed people. Just as when the Jews were persecuted in Spain by Isabella, they fled to the Muslim lands. When they were gassed and slaughtered by the Europeans in the Holocaust, they fled to the Muslim lands. When they were slaughtered in Warsaw in Poland, in the Warsaw Ghetto, they fled to the Muslim lands. South Africa understands, just as Europe reluctantly does, that in history, the greatest sanctuary that oppressed people always found was always amongst the Muslims, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا. Do not let a hatred of a people lead you to injustice. اِعْدِلُوا هُوَ أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى. Allah said, regardless of who the person is in front of you, if there is a haqq that they are entitled to, be the ones on the front line to ensure their haqq, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim. And South Africa appreciates that, and we extend our thanks to South Africa for returning the favor and launching this case in the ICJ.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Sami. So my next question, Brother Sami, is that you already talked about the Ummah of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, our Ummah. What makes us weak, and why the Palestinian cause, it used to be the cause of the whole Ummah, why it starts resizing it until it becomes in Gaza?
I think that I often get posed this question, why is the Ummah weak and why is the Ummah in a difficult situation or the like? And I think there's a difference between weak and difficult situation. Difficult situation does not mean you're weak. Difficult situation means you're in a battle, that you're struggling. It doesn't mean that you're weak or defeated. And the reason why I reject the idea that the Ummah is weak and that it has
Wait a minute, I'm not talking about the Ummah as people. I'm talking about the government in issue.
We'll get to the government. But in terms of the government themselves and their interests, I think that when it comes to the governments, the reality is that the governments all have their particular interests that they're following. And before I continue, I should stress that the opinions expressed by the speaker belong to the speaker themselves. They do not reflect the organization or those who invited me, or Irving Masjid or Irving Masjid or the likes. So please, it has nothing to do with them. It's all to do with me. I think that when we look at the 5 major countries that are having a major impact, Saudi, UAE, Turkey, Jordan, and Egypt, I think that individually they all have very conflicting interests that results in them deciding not to join the support for the Palestinians, and in some cases, in 2 of those examples, 2 countries in particular, siding very closely with the Israelis. And what I mean is, I truly believe that based on what we've seen in front of us, that one of the reasons that Biden has not called for a ceasefire is because Biden is genuinely confused. On the one hand, Biden is being told that Muslims are angry. He's being told that Muslims want to punish him and punish Genocide Joe and the like, and that there's a rabble rouser from London who's going around telling people to punish Genocide Joe. On the other hand, he's being told by his Muslim allies in the region, 2 in particular, that genocide is not a red line. We're not really bothered by it. We're ready to normalize ties. We're ready to keep talking about normalization as long as you give us a NATO-style security agreement against Iran, as long as you give us nuclear technology to build our own nuclear weapon, and as long as you support Vision 2030, because when we try to bring Nicki Minaj and Iggy Azalea, we're making an effort to de-Islamize the kingdom. We've introduced alcohol. We introduced a bikini beach as well into the land of the holy mosques, and still you're not responding. We're ready to do more, but we want to see genuine support for as well. So I think that when it comes to, for example, Saudi Arabia, I think that Saudi has what it believes to be an existential economic crisis and existential security crisis. Existential economic crisis in that, for those of you who remember, in 2016 or 2015, Saudi Arabia burnt through 1/6 of its treasury in 1 year because the oil price was so low, because the Americans were pushing to try to take a larger chunk of the market, and the price was going lower because of shale oil or the like. The Saudis realized, legitimately so, that they badly need to diversify their economy, and they need to do so quickly. And that's where Vision 2030 comes in. Vision 2030 is about diversifying the economy to make it less reliant on oil, which is why they need new revenues. They need Shakira concerts, Pitbull, raves in the desert. They need all these other alcohol. They need, I'm not saying they need it. They're arguing. It's not me saying it. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. I need to be careful. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. The point is that they believe that Vision 2030 needs to open up, and as a result, they've made changes to the system whereby in the education curriculum, for example, they reduce the hours that students spend on Arabic, fiqh, Islamic education, and Quran. They reduce it from 38 hours to 25 hours, and they dedicated those extra 13 hours to subjects of critical thinking. Their words, not mine. The point being is that there's been a reduction in the volume of Islam in Saudi Arabia, an attempt to restrict it to Mecca and Medina in order to allow the rest of Saudi Arabia to start to open up, to build cities that, in the words of the Saudi Crown Prince, look like Miami. He uses that as his model, not Shanghai or Moscow. And the way that they do it, Saudi believes, bin Salman says, here's a trade-off. Muslims can land in Jeddah. They can go to Mecca and Medina and pray there and do their rituals that they want to do about Islam. And the rest of Saudi Arabia will be free to do whatever. And that he believes that's a necessity in order to become an economic power, because the country relies too much on oil. The problem for Saudi Arabia, however, is that when the Saudi Crown Prince came to power in 2017, he visited America 2018. He met Mark Zuckerberg, Oprah Winfrey, all these leaders, and he told the Americans, come and invest in Vision 2030. All the Americans were excited. There's a new Crown Prince. He's talking about opening Saudi Arabia or the like. The problem was the following year, Khashoggi entered an embassy and never came out. When he didn't come out, there was the big, huge media buzz about Khashoggi. The Saudis believed that Khashoggi was a regime man. He was part of us, and therefore, why is everybody making a big deal out of him? This is an internal regime issue. But as a result of issues with Qatar and the like, there was a really media campaign that really elevated the issue. And Erdogan also, started leaking some of the gruesome details. As a result, companies didn't go to Saudi Arabia in 2018. 2019, they still didn't go because there was a Khashoggi issue. 2020, when Khashoggi issue was lifting a bit and people were starting to forget, COVID hit. When COVID hit, companies still wouldn't come to Saudi Arabia because nobody was investing. When 2021 COVID started lifting a little bit, Biden wins the election. When Biden wins the election, he says that the Saudi Crown Prince is a pariah and I'm not going to deal with him. So companies are hesitant to go to Saudi Arabia because they're worried Biden is going to implement sanctions. So the Saudi Crown Prince reconciles with Qatar. He gets Al Jazeera to be quiet about all of his affairs and the like, something that's very important even in the Gaza issue, because you'll note Al Jazeera doesn't talk about any of the positions of the Arab countries because they want to keep the peace with Saudi Arabia and the UAE. It's a red line. No one is allowed to talk about it in Qatar. But the point is that after 2021, you get to 2022, 5 years in power, and Vision 2030 is not moving. Vision 2030, the economic diversification, is not moving in the way that you want. So much so that they had to take an extra dividend from Aramco and they had to change the structure of the public investment fund to try to cover the losses that they made in that year that might put companies off. So you get to 2021, you get to 2022, Biden comes to Jeddah, he wants a reset. But when Biden comes to Jeddah, he asks for a reset, but then humiliates the Saudi Crown Prince, because when he comes out of the meeting with the Saudi Crown Prince, because of the American free press, all the journalists come out and they say, what about Khashoggi? What about Khashoggi? And Biden turns around and he says, I told the Crown Prince about Khashoggi and I let him know who I thought did it. And the Saudi Crown Prince panics. So Saudi media, they say that the Saudi Crown Prince responded and said, you're talking about Khashoggi. What about Shireen Abu Aqla? What did you do about her? Whatever you think about the Crown Prince, that's a Touché. That's a good response. In any case, it's clear that the tensions between Biden and the Saudi Crown Prince are still there. So we enter the end of 2022. 6 years bin Salman's been in power. Vision 2030 is not moving. 2023, he gets so frustrated that he imposes tariffs on goods coming across UAE to tell companies you can't be based in UAE and do business in Saudi Arabia. And then he tells companies that whoever doesn't have a headquarters in Riyadh, they will not be able to win government contracts. And then he starts to essentially try to squeeze those companies. The point being is Saudi Arabia believes it's in an economic existential crisis and it badly needs the Americans and American support to help to invest into its economy. The security existential crisis is that when you open a map of Saudi Arabia, and imagine this is Saudi Arabia, to your north you have Iraq, 23 militias that are pro-Iran, that have been firing missiles at the Saudi royal palace, and whose leader Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis in 2019 gave a lecture, who was killed by Donald Trump. He gave a lecture in Tehran where the students said to him, MashaAllah, you are a mujahid who will liberate Al-Aqsa. And he said, no, not Al-Aqsa, Riyadh, that's our destination, that's where we're going. Anybody can find it online, it's a viral video. On the east you have Iran itself, which Iran can close the Hormuz whenever it wants, and the Saudis are worried that the Americans won't do enough. To the south there are the Houthis, who've been firing missiles at oil facilities, and when they fired the missiles at the Abqaiq oil facility, the Saudis expected the Americans to intervene. Instead, the Americans didn't intervene, which is why the Saudis went to the Iranians and said, please, give me 5 years of peace. What do you want? They said, I want Bashar al-Assad to be back in the Arab League. They said, Hafidh. They said, I want investment in Syria so I can get the money, my compensation for rescuing Assad. They said, Hafidh. They said, I want you to talk to the Houthis and make a deal with them and recognize them. Hafidh. I want compensation to be given to the Houthis. He said, Hafidh. And then the negotiation stalled. Why? Because Biden said that if you normalize ties with Israel, I might give you a NATO-style security agreement and I might give you nuclear weapons. So when Israel commits a genocide in Gaza, bin Salman says to himself that I'm on the verge of getting the Americans to invest in Vision 2030 and to give me protection against Iran from those militias. I'm not going to compromise those two things for a bunch of Palestinians who aren't even going to go anywhere anyway. They're going to stay in Gaza. Netanyahu is not going to be able to kill them. That felt sickening to say, but in any case, it is what it is. The Saudis believe that as a result, their Vision 2030, Shakira concert, Iggy Azalea, Ngannou and Tyson Fury, this opening up of the kingdom, introducing alcohol, these are all very important things for Vision 2030, for the future of Saudi Arabia. I'm not jeopardizing that. And bin Salman also argues, legitimately so in my opinion, he says that the first country to willingly normalize with Israel was Qatar in 1996. When Qatar normalized ties and they established an economic office in Doha and the largest US military base in exchange for the Americans preventing Saudi from invading, for those who don't know, long story short, the emir is sick, he goes to Switzerland for medical treatment. His son calls him in Switzerland and says, Baba, don't come back, I've taken over this country. The father says, what are you doing? What do you mean? He calls Saudi and UAE and says, my son has done a coup, please put me back in power. The Saudis say, no problem, we can't have sons like toppling their fathers. They get ready to invade Qatar. The Qatari emir, who's taken over the son, calls the Americans and the French and says, Wallahi, if you stop the Saudis from invading, I will establish ties with Israel. I won't do like Egypt and Jordan, where it's a peace treaty. I'll willingly do it. I'll set up an economic office, and I will set up the largest US military base if you stop Saudi and UAE from entering. The Americans get so excited, they call Saudi, they say, don't you dare invade Qatar. The Saudi Crown Prince says that the Ummah makes a million excuses for Qatar because they have Al Jazeera and some ulama and their scholars and the like, and they're willing to turn a blind eye to other things. UAE, when it normalized ties, they got, some mashayikh, we won't name them, who came out and said that this is, there is hikmah in this and the like, and there are some prominent American mashayikh who also justified it as well, and there are many Muslims who said, maybe he has a point. The Saudi Crown Prince says, if the Ummah makes excuses for Qatar and UAE, why wouldn't they make excuses for me? When I normalize ties, for my own interests, I'll keep my ulama giving da'wah and durus and stuff, and people can listen to it, and they can cry when they listen to these imams and say, MashaAllah, I'm getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They don't need to come to the concerts and raves. When they land in Jeddah, whoever wants to go to the concert and make tawbah afterwards, they can go, and whoever just wants to go straight to Mecca, then go straight to Mecca. Lakum dinuk, not lakum dinuk waliyadin. But in any case, the point here being is the Saudi Crown Prince believes Palestine is not worth it. There are some who will say that you mentioned a lot about Saudi Arabia, but the reality is the Muslim powers don't have options. The reality is that when Biden offended bin Salman personally, Bin Salman squeezed Biden. He cut the oil production, increased the prices, and he made Biden come and beg him in Jeddah for a reset in relations. When the Canadian ambassador accused Saudi Arabia of a poor human rights record, Bin Salman kicked out the Canadian ambassador and ripped up agreements with the Canadians, and the Canadians 8 months later begged Bin Salman for a reset in ties. When the Germans said we're not selling anything to Saudi Arabia, Bin Salman cut off investments from Germany, and last week the Germans came out and said, please, 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 we will give you the weapons that you want, please come back and invest in Germany. When you offend Bin Salman personally, he knows how to squeeze the Western powers to beg him to make concessions. But when it comes to Gaza, he doesn't believe that it's worth it. And that's why I think that one of the reasons that Biden hasn't called for a ceasefire is because Saudi Arabia has consistently and proactively reassured the Americans that normalization is still possible, even though a genocide of 20,000 people have been killed. For the UAE as well, UAE says that normalization of ties has meant that our militia that is rampaging in Sudan doesn't get any scrutiny because Congress is too scared that if they scrutinize this militia that is committing a genocide in Western Sudan, then UAE might get upset and reverse normalization, and normalization is more important than countering this genocide taking place in Sudan. The UAE believes that normalization is what prevents Congress and the White House from putting pressure on it. And for those who think that perhaps Sami is exaggerating, there is an interview by the former Qatari Prime Minister with France 24 in November 2018, worth watching in my opinion. Around 36 minutes, 37 minutes into the interview, he says that, look, when Arabs talk to the Israelis, it's not because they like the Israelis. It's because they believe that Israel is the key to the Congress and the White House. Now he continues and he says, but we in Qatar, when we normalize, we did it because we want to see Israelis in Riyadh and in Doha and these other places. But that's irrelevant because they have Muslim scholars. The Ummah turns a blind eye to what Qatar does. But in any case, the point here being is that when the UAE normalized and believed that it got 100% benefit from that normalization. Erdogan in Turkey says, I have an economic crisis because for 20 years I increased interest rates, and then as I got older I felt now is the time that I make it haram and I need to bring those interest rates down now. After 20 years halal, and now suddenly I need to bring them down. And as a result, the currency crashed. He says, I need money, I'm suffering with an economic crisis or the like. So Erdogan has been squeezed in the Mediterranean, squeezed by the US, squeezed by Russia. So he decided to go to the Israelis and say, let's build a joint gas pipeline in the Mediterranean, let's share the gas, and let's build an economic corridor that starts in Israel and goes through Turkey to Central Asia and connects with Europe. And that's why the week before, October 7th, the week before, he shook hands with Netanyahu and said, we're ready to establish a warmer ties and the like. Erdogan believes that he doesn't want to jeopardize those relations with Israel. But he's been told by Biden, and I do believe this is Biden's position, that Biden wants Netanyahu out. If you notice 4 days ago when Blinken went to Tel Aviv, Blinken met with Yair Lapid and with Benny Gantz, two opposition figures in Israel, without the permission of Netanyahu. And if you look at Netanyahu's statement after the meeting, Netanyahu said two things. He said, we reject a two-state solution and we don't believe this is the right time to hold elections. It was a pushback against the Americans' demand to try to push Netanyahu out. Which is why when you listen to Erdogan's speeches, most of his speeches, we can't work with Netanyahu. We can't deal with Netanyahu. We don't want to talk to Netanyahu. The message being that Netanyahu is going, but we want to maintain that Sha'adat Muawiyah. For those who don't know what Sha'adat Muawiyah is, it's the hair of Muawiyah. Muawiyah once said that if I argue with my brother and we're on the verge of cutting ties and all that remains between us is a hair and we're both pulling, I will not pull on the hair to make sure I keep relations and contact and the way back to reconciliation. So Erdogan is keeping a Sha'adat Muawiyah. I don't think Muawiyah would be happy if I ever used it in that context. But in any case, you're using Sha'adat Muawiyah with the Israelis. And that's why I think that when Netanyahu came out in the second week and said, we thank our friends for understanding our position with regards to the genocide, the friends he was referring to were the Muslim leaders who were saying to the Americans that genocide is not a red line. Genocide is not problematic because we have these interests that we need to do. Having said that, and this is where I wrap up on this, having said that, the public opinion has affected Muslim nations as well. The reason Erdogan went from a neutral statement to lambasting Israel is because the Turks got so angry that they began to turn their anger at Erdogan. And Erdogan panicked, and that's why he's been organizing rallies to allow the Turks to vent off steam, to let them out and giving them the speeches, because there was a video that went viral in Turkey of a Turk where he said, Erdogan, you called us onto the streets in 2016 to rescue you from the attempted coup. Call us out now for Gaza. And Erdogan panicked and went and organized that million-man rally in Istanbul, and he's been doing rally to at least let the Turks feel like he's doing something, despite the fact that trade has increased between Israel and Turkey 30% since the start of the genocide. Although there are reports that Erdogan might be cutting ties or the like. But for example, the Ummah has also had an impact on bin Salman in Saudi Arabia. So for those who haven't been following Saudi Arabia and the de-Islamization process, over the past couple of years, Imams have been restricted in their ability to make dua for Palestine or talk about current affairs. So in the first few days after the genocide began, the Saudi state television, for the first time in a year, broadcast the dua of the Haramain, and they broadcast the dua in Mecca, and the Imam was making dua for Palestine. This was the Saudi crown prince concerned about his population and therefore trying to show that we are also on the side of Palestine, while trying to balance it by mobilizing the scholars to give fatwa to say that talking about Gaza is fitna. Many of you will have seen the video of Abdurrahman al-Sudais, the Imam of Mecca, where he said, we make dua for Gaza, but we don't talk about it because it's a fitna. And obey your ruler and obey your scholars. We saw the khutbah in Medina al-Munawwara, where the Imam said, make dua for Gaza, but don't talk about it, and beware the rabble-rousers from London who might turn you, he didn't say rabble-rousers from London, but beware those who might turn you against your leader. When my wife and I, we run this travel company, we try to reconnect memories of the Ummah, taking people to different destinations. So she went to present on a new theory about the industry in the World Halal Summit in Istanbul. When she went there is a friend of ours, he was an advisor to Mahathir in Malaysia. He said to her, tell Sami that I'm going to Umrah in December, and I received a WhatsApp message that says, when I go to Umrah, please don't bring a kafiyah, don't bring a free Gaza sticker, and please don't record yourselves making dua for Gaza. So I told my wife, I can't talk about this because it's a rumor and I haven't seen any evidence of it. And trust me, American Imams have pushed back on my videos before. I'm not interested in risking a backlash, especially because I'm going to America soon, inshallah. In any case, astaghfirullah. In any case, when I landed in LA, in beautiful blue sky, sunny LA, 27 degrees Celsius on the 25th of November, for a guy who has 5 days of summer a year and they don't even come at the same time, I said to myself, Allah, I will never spend winter anywhere else. But in any case, I should be wary though. Every place I go in America, it's always raining. It's like Allah said, you didn't show gratitude for the weather. I'm going to give you rain everywhere you go. Even when I went to San Diego, I saw rain. So Allahumma, I'm grateful for the weather. Barakallahu feek for the rain. Walhamdulillah, walhamdulillah, wa shukullah. Wa la in shakartum la azidannakum. And I give you also better from it. I'm thankful for the rain. So inshallah, when I go San Jose tomorrow, I see the sun. Gulu ameen. In any case, when I went to LA, I gave my talk and then we went to have dinner in the evening. And I said to the brothers sitting around, there were about maybe 15, 20 of them. And I said, you know, I heard a rumor that when you go Umrah, you're not allowed to record yourself making dua for Gaza. And one person stood up and he said, Sami, it's not a rumor. Here's the WhatsApp message. I'm going Umrah next month. Here it is. And the message said, it's with a heavy heart that we inform you that we've been informed by the authorities in Saudi Arabia not to make dua for Gaza, not to record yourselves, and not to bring kafiyas. But public opinion was so loud and so frightening for bin Salman that although in the first week they were arresting people wearing kafiyas, in Saudi Arabia last week there are many people wearing kafiyas because they've been told by the Saudis that we're worried about the backlash. Go easy in terms of your crackdown on kafiyas or the like. The thing is, they're trying to play it in both ways, because what bin Salman is realizing is that the ummah stands for haqq, not batil. The ummah doesn't follow personalities, it follows haqq. So when they see personalities with haqq, they stand with them. When they see the personalities abandon haqq, they tear them down. They loved Abdurrahman al-Sudais when he read the Quran, and when he gave that fatwa, they started to stop listening to Abdurrahman al-Sudais. And that's the thing, and that's what bin Salman realized. The point is, and I know I said I'm wrapping up already, but I promise this is where I wrap up. But the point that I'm saying is that while it's true that the Muslim leaders are demonstrating their own interest with regards to Gaza, Palestine, and therefore betraying Gaza, Palestine, public opinion is also having an impact in that they're also buckling and having to offer concessions to their people because they're worried about the backlash that their support for Zionism will. And for those who insist, why did you say support for Zionism? I will give you two examples, and I promise we'll go to the next question. The first example is that in the third week of the genocide, the Saudis invited Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, to give a keynote speech at the Davos in the Desert Forum. And Jared Kushner, from the heart of Saudi Arabia, while the genocide is going on, he gave a keynote speech in which he said that October 7th was designed to ruin normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and they will not succeed. And not a single Saudi in the forum said, how dare you say this in the heart of Saudi Arabia? And he was allowed, and he said that normalization is still very much possible, and the Saudis are telling me that normalization can go ahead soon. The second example is that on the night that Israel cut off communications in Gaza, cut off the internet, and began its ground invasion, Shakira was in Riyadh dancing in the Riyadh season concert. And the day before, the Muslims were saying that why is this concert going ahead when Gaza is being slaughtered? And Turki al-Sheikh, the head of the General Entertainment Authority, ironically the descendant of Sheikh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, Turki al-Sheikh said, he wrote a Facebook post where he said, name me one concert that has been cancelled in the world because of a political event. How can you ask me to cancel it for Gaza? And he didn't even say at the end, may Allah have mercy on the shuhada in Gaza. But the irony was that when the Emir of Kuwait died, Allah yarahmu, when the Emir of Kuwait died, they had a huge concert planned on the day that he died. So the Saudis were caught in a catch-22. If we don't cancel the concert, because the Arab saying goes that if you have a wedding but your neighbor has a janazah, you delay the wedding. If we don't cancel the concert, we will have a diplomatic crisis with Kuwait. And Kuwait are good friends. But if we cancel the concert, the Ummah will know that we don't care about Gaza because we cancelled it for the Emir of Kuwait, but we don't cancel it for Gaza. In the end, they felt they didn't want to risk a diplomatic crisis with Kuwait. So they cancelled the concert for Kuwait. So Turki al-Sheikh was talking nonsense when he said we don't cancel political events. They cancelled the concerts for 2 days in solidarity with Kuwait, but have not cancelled a single concert with regards to Gaza. But having said that, public opinion is making a difference even on Saudi Arabia, even on UAE. UAE blamed the Palestinians for what happened, but as a result of public pressure, they allowed their commentators to criticize Israel, and they were the first to send aid to Gaza. And also, while the UAE are reassuring Biden and Israel that they will not reverse normalization, it was the UAE that let the CNN presenters into Gaza to cover the reality, because bin Zayed said that I'm struggling with this public pressure coming from the Ummah. Biden has told me Netanyahu will go. Let me try to accelerate it by humiliating Netanyahu in front of the Americans so that Netanyahu can go, Benny Gantz can come to power, and these Muslims can go back to their, going back to, I want to make hijrah, or I want to live a Muslim life, in the UAE, in a country where, the government is massacring Muslims abroad. But because you can take Instagram selfies and of your salat in Sheikh Zayed Mosque, that's the pinnacle of deen and the pinnacle of Islam for you. So, bin Zayed says, I know what the Muslim Ummah is like. They love to come to the UAE because they love my Masjid, and they love the Islamic schools that I have, because for them, Islam is not like the Sahaba where you uphold justice. Islam for them is peace, security, and comfort to do your 5 daily prayers in the Masjid and go to Islamic schools and not be bothered with what's happening in the world. Now, the dream of the Muslim today is to die in Medina, even though only a minority of Sahaba are buried in Medina. The majority are buried outside of Medina, because their interpretation of Islam was that Allah will give victory to an ummah that stands for justice, whereas the interpretation of the ummah today is that Allah will give victory to an ummah that does the rituals but abandons the justice.
I think everybody got the message. My next question is, do you agree that freeing Palestine can be seen as freeing the world from capitalism, ego, desires, and greed, while calling humanity to a higher purpose in life?
I think that Palestine, when people talk about what does Palestine mean to people, I think for the Muslim it's abundantly clear in terms of its holiness. الَّذِي بَارَكْنَا حَوْلَهُ. We made it blessed around it. Al-Aqsa being the mosque where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam led all of the other prophets in prayer, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam ascended the 7 heavens, where he received the barakah of prayer, where he received 50 rak'at, and then Musa alayhi salam said to him, I was the prophet of Bani Israel, and Bani Israel could not even do 3. Ya Muhammad, go back to your Lord and ask for less. So he went back, Rasulullah, and he was given 45. Then he came down. Musa alayhi salam said, I know Bani Israel, they couldn't do 3. Go back and ask for less. And the Prophet ﷺ came back down. But I think also, what Palestine represents more than anything else is this deficiency in the moral consciousness of the world, in that a people can be driven out of their homes, turfed from their land, slaughtered in cold blood, for no other reason than a random group of people turned up from Europe after being persecuted and said that I want to live in this house. In the words of Yaqub from Brooklyn, if I don't steal it, somebody else will. The point being is that it's a glaring deficiency in the global consciousness, because although people recognize that the Palestinians have been unjustly treated in being turfed from their homes and their lands and slaughtered after they welcomed the Jews who had been persecuted from Europe, after they embraced them and said that just as we embraced you when you were kicked out of Spain, just as we embraced you when you were kicked out of Poland, just as we embraced you when anti-Semitic white supremacist Europe was so racist and so brutal that they declared the Balfour Declaration because they wanted to kick you out, because they saw you as aliens. We are Muslims, they are not our teachers. We have a tolerance from Islam, not from them. We welcome you. And instead of saying, thank you for welcoming us and let's live side by side as we always have, they decided to pick up a gun and go and shoot them instead. I think the reason it's a glaring deficiency in the moral consciousness is that although the world recognizes that the Palestinians have been wronged unjustly, though instead of the world saying, let's come together to give redress and justice to the Palestinians, instead the international community has come together and said, let's talk about a two-state solution. The point being, instead of the world saying, let's give these Palestinians their homes back, they came together and instead of saying, let's give them their homes back and let's get justice, they said, how can we legalize the illegality? Let's talk about how much theft of land we can legalize under the two-state solution. Let's not make the negotiations about justice. Let's make it and say that because we like these guys better than you, we want to acknowledge and recognize their theft of the land and we want to legalize it. Please tell us how much theft you're willing to swallow, how much theft you're willing to tolerate, and we'll call this the peaceful two-state solution. The point being is that as long as Palestine is chained, the moral consciousness of the world, Muslim and non-Muslim, is tainted and undermined by the fact that we're trying to legalize an oppression and immorality. And for the Muslim who says that Al-Aqsa is special to the Muslims because of the Masjid itself, I also remind them that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that the blood of a Muslim is dearer than a brick on the Kaaba. That the blood of a Muslim, that the Prophet ﷺ in Khutbat al-Wada'a, in his last speech that he gave to the Muslims, he said, إِنَّ دِمَاؤُكُمْ وَأَعْرَاضُكُمْ وَأَمْوَالُكُمْ حَرَامٌ عَلَيْكُمْ كَحُرْمَةِ يَوْمِكُمْ هَذَا فِي بَلَدِكُمْ هَذَا فِي شَهْرِكُمْ هَذَا. The point being is that the Prophet ﷺ said that your blood, your wealth and your honor are sacred between you. The same sacredness, the same sanctity as this holy land that you're on, in this holy month that you are in this holy place that we're in. The point being is the Prophet ﷺ was, even when you read in the Quran about why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was so angry with Quraysh, he always talks about أُخْرِجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ وَأُوذُوا فِي, those driven out of their homes, those driven. Even when he tells the Sahaba about what they should do to get their justice, he says, drive them out from where they drove you out, but don't transgress beyond that. The point is Allah insisting on the justice. And the reason why I mentioned this point is to wrap up on this particular point, which is that Muslims understand, and non-Muslims need to understand, that what the Muslim is looking for is not revenge. The Muslim is not driven by revenge. The Muslim is taught that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam entered Mecca, and instead of taking revenge, he forgave Hind, who had cut open the body of his uncle Hamza and mutilated it and ate his organ, ate his liver. He forgave Wahshi, who threw the spear that killed his uncle Hamza. He forgave the leaders of Quraysh, who had boycotted him and kicked him out of his land and warred with him for 23 years. He forgave all of them because the Prophet ﷺ was not sent as a curse to mankind, but as a mercy to guide them out of darkness into light. And that's why when it comes to Palestine and what it means, the reason why I mentioned justice and moral consciousness and not revenge is because when Umar ibn Khattab entered Jerusalem, he is the one who brought the Jews back who had been kicked out by the Christians. When Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi entered Al-Aqsa, entered Jerusalem, whereas the Christians 100 years before had massacred 70,000 Muslims, Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi ordered that every Christian home was to be safe and protected because he said, they are not our teachers, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is our teacher. And the reason we use these examples in Islam is to emphasize that Palestine for us is not about revenge. It's not against the Jew. It's against injustice and oppression. And that's why when the Muslim sees the Jews stand up for the justice of Palestine, we embrace them like the cousin and we say, welcome to the cause of justice. And remember that we celebrate those Jews who did the sit-in in Congress calling for a ceasefire. I've been to the protests for Palestine. I've seen the Jews at those protests celebrating the justice of Palestine and saying, we stand with you as well. Because their fitrah that Allah created in every human being resonates with the justice that the Muslims call for. Because remember, and this is the final point I promise that I leave on, even in global history, there are 3 examples that are used objectively to describe the coexistence of religions. They are Andalusia under the Muslims. They are Sarajevo, which is called the Jerusalem of Europe, under the Muslims. And it is Jerusalem itself, which was only the epitome of coexistence when the Muslims ruled it. The West talks about its values, when in reality, coexistence and tolerance, it comes from the rich history of Islam. It doesn't come from the history of white supremacist anti-Semitic Europe, which has a history of the Holocaust, of the Inquisition, of the Warsaw Ghetto, of the Night of the Long Knives, where they destroyed Jewish buildings. It's Islam that has the rich history, where it doesn't have any equivalent to the Holocaust, any equivalent to the Spanish Inquisition, and which saved the Jews every single time they were persecuted. Which is why when the Muslim says to the Jew, why are you doing this to the Palestinians? They're not saying it from a state of revenge. They're saying it, we rescued you from Europe so many times. Why are you doing to the Palestinians what these anti-Semitic Europeans did to you?
Jazakallah khair, Brother Sami. So I will give you 2-3 minutes break, I know, to drink some water. So while in the break, inshallah, we'll invite our Luqman come and do some Nasheed for us. I have 2-3 questions after the Nasheed, inshallah, then we'll wrap up, inshallah. Yeah, there is. Yeah.
I promise I won't be too long with the answers so we can have Q&A, inshallah.
Go ahead. Use the mic.
SubhanAllah, I was trying to hide from Sheikh Nuruddin, but he found me. Inshallah, I'll be singing Mawtini for you all, inshallah. It's what people will call the Palestinian national anthem. Bismillah. موطني موطني الجلال والجمال والسناء والبهاء في رباك والحياة والنجاة والهناء والرجاء في هواك هل أراك سالما منعما وغانما مكرما سالما منعما وغانما مكرما هل أراك في علاك تبلغ السماك موطني الشباب لن يكل همه أن يستقل أو يبيد نستقي من الردى ولن نهون للعدا كالعبيد لا نريد لا نريد ذلنا المؤبدا وعيشنا المنكدا ذلنا المؤبدا وعيشنا المنكدا لا نريد بل نعيد مجدنا التليد مجدنا التليد موطني 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 الحزام واليراع لا الكلام والنزاع رمزنا رمزنا مجدنا وعهدنا وواجب إلى الوفاء يؤزنا يؤزنا عزنا عزنا غاية تشرف وراية ترفرف غاية تشرف وراية ترفرف يا هناك في علاك قاهرا عداك قاهرا عداك موطني موطني.
Takbir.
Allahu Akbar.
Jazakallah khair, brother Luqman, mashallah, barakallah. They remind me about my youthful. I used to sing the same Mautani, Mautini. I guess everybody who went to the Islamic camp in the Arab world, he went through this. Brother Ra'id, I guess you can. So let's move, inshallah. Brother Sami, you know better Malcolm Nabi, right?
Of course.
Okay. So Malcolm Nabi said, predicted actually, that the West hasn't expanded its value beyond its borders. How does this statement mean in today's context, especially considering the current divide between the fact and the values?
I think that one of Malik ibn Nabi said that, and also I think it was Samuel Huntington who said that what the West fails to realize is that their superiority did not come about by their values but by the sword. So they insist that Islam was spread by the sword. But if Islam was spread by the sword, why is it that 1400 years later Islam is still the fastest growing religion, even in areas where Muslims no longer rule those territories? And the reason why I say that is that my mother is Algerian, and Algerians are proud of where they come from, mashallah. So one of the things that the French, what hurt them so much about losing Algeria in particular, was that 132 years of occupation, and for those who don't know what the French did, the French were brutal. So the French would line up hijabis in a line, and they would line them up every week, and then they'd pull the hijab off and say, "You are liberated." And I'll tell you a story in the family of mine, for example. I had my great uncle Tijani, Allah yarahmu, he was killed by the French. But one day he was walking, and his cousin was pregnant, and she was walking on the street. 4 French soldiers, they saw her pregnant, so they took out machetes and knives, and they mocked her, and they said, "Let's see what gender the baby is." So they were going to rip open her stomach and pull the baby out. He panicked, he picked up a rifle, he shot towards them, and they ran away. That night they came into his house and they riddled him with bullets. The French wanted to eradicate Algerian culture to the extent that they would insist that the Algerians had to speak French, not Arabic. And so after 100 years, you could feel like there were many Algerians who spoke French better than they spoke Arabic, and the French were very happy about that. What hurt the French about the liberation of Algeria is that when Algeria was liberated, the French were upset that firstly, the Algerians could not understand the wonderful French values and the superior to French values. And not only that, Algerians, when they took to the streets, they didn't say Algeria, Algeria and Algeria is liberated. They said, "Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad," referring to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They said, "Ya Muhammad, Mabrook alik. Al-Jazair raj'at lik. Oh Prophet Muhammad, they yelled, they roared. Oh Prophet Muhammad, congratulations. Algeria has been returned to you. They were saying, Ya Rasulullah, we never forgot you. Ya Rasulullah, they persecuted us, but we refused to give you up. They told us if we abandon you and be French, they will let us live in comfort. We said, no, we will never give you up. They told us if we become civilized like them and abandon you, we will be free. Ya Rasulullah, we prefer to be with you than have their freedom. Ya Rasulullah, 132 years, we gave 1.5 million shuhada. And we are proud that we did it for you, Ya Rasulullah. Ya Muhammad, Mabruk alik. Al-Jazair raj'at lik. The French, they said, how is it with all of our technology, weapons, advances, poetry, culture, sophistication? What is it about these people that means that when we commit genocide against them, when we persecute them, when we chop off the breasts of their women, when we rip off their hijab, when we riddle them with bullets, when we abuse them, torture them, and say to them that they could live in comfort and we will stop doing this to them as long as they give up La ilaha Muhammad Rasulullah and they speak French? Why do these people refuse to give it up? Why do these people refuse to live in comfort and choose to struggle for the sake of a man who died 1400 years ago and his Lord? Why is Afghanistan a country that has never been conquered by anyone, but the only message to conquer their hearts and enter their hearts was La ilaha Muhammad Rasulullah, and they embraced it so much that when every conqueror came into Afghanistan, the Afghans would say, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. I would rather meet my Prophet with a face that says, I loved you and I struggled for you, than give him up and to live like you. The French, they say that we colonized most of the Muslim world. And I went to Paris and I met a French journalist. And he said to me, Monsieur Sami, on a un grand problème. We have a big problem. I said, c'est quoi le problème, mon frère? What's your problem, brother? He said, in France today, the heroes of the new French generation, they are the Muslim N'Golo Kante. They are the Muslim Karim Benzema. They are the Muslim Zinedine Zidane, the Muslim Paul Pogba. We have many French people, they are becoming Muslims. Sami, would you accept in your country if Antoine Griezmann was their hero? I said, it doesn't happen in Muslim countries. Because we love the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and what he stood for. It's you guys who have you guys are the ones struggling with this. It's nothing to do with us. Islam remains the fastest growing religion, despite the fact that you believe the ummah to be weak. Ibadallah, the reason I gave the example earlier of Umar ibn al-Khattab leaving the elites of the Quraysh and joining the Prophet and the Muslims sallallahu alayhi wasallam and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, is he left and joined them when the Prophet had no power or army over Quraysh. He said that the word and message of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is more powerful and greater to me than the weapons and the army and the money of Quraysh. There's something powerful about the values of Islam that means that even when Gaza, a genocide is taking place, when people are seeing the Gaza taking place, they don't say, what a weak people, look how they're being killed. Instead, you get people on TikTok, non-Muslims, saying, I need to read the Quran because I want to understand how these people are so powerful that they are suffering a genocide and they are saying, Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel wa inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un wallahu akbar. And we were standing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Which makes a girl open the Quran on TikTok and say, you know what guys, every day I'm going to go through a page. And she goes through 1 week later, she pops up on her TikTok with a hijab and she says, I tell you guys, I entered Islam.
And we have a good news that sister, she's going to accept Islam today after this.
Bismillah, mashallah, quwwata billah. Because what attracts them to Islam is not what you wish Islam would have, which is the armies and the weapons. What attracts them to Islam is a power that no tank can destroy, no missile can destroy, and no money can buy. When Abu Sufyan sent a member of the Quraysh and said, go and scout out the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba and find me a traitor that I might be able to buy. And he came back and he said, Wallahi, the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ will never give him up even if you gave them a mountain of gold. Because they loved the message of the Prophet ﷺ and they loved Allah so much, they would rather meet Allah and say, Allah, I struggled for you, than say, I gave them up for a bit of comfort in this dunya. When they enter Islam, you insist that the Muslims or the Ummah might be weak. These people are not joining a weak Ummah. They're joining a powerful Ummah. They've seen a mighty power in the Ummah that does not exist in the values of the West. When Alija Izetbegovic, the Muslim philosopher of Europe, president of Bosnia, was asked by a news agency in 1993, Alija, you keep talking about this tolerance of coexistence between the Croats, Serbs and the Bosniaks. Because remember, the Serbs were talking about only a Serbian state and eradicating the Muslims. The Croats were talking about Croatia only for the Orthodox Christians and only for the Croats. The Muslim Izetbegovic was the only one saying, I want a Bosnia where we all live together and coexist peacefully. So the question was put, where does this how is it that you hold on to this European tolerance? And he said, excuse me, this isn't a European tolerance. European tolerance is the Holocaust. European tolerance is the Spanish Inquisition. European tolerance is the Serbian genocide that seeks to eradicate the Muslims. The tolerance that you celebrate in me is a Muslim tolerance. It was taught by my Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who when he entered Medina, he told the Jews, I'm not here to subjugate you. Whoever oppresses you, we will stand with you against the oppressor. So when we talk about the values, like Malik bin Nabi when he says the West doesn't realize that they didn't become powerful because of their values. They didn't become powerful because of their values. If they did, Islam wouldn't be the fastest growing religion in the world. Capitalism would be. But it's not. And this is why when we look at the Algeria example, the Bosnia example, the Turkish example, Ataturk comes to power, tells the military to do a coup on every single person who tries to Islamize the state. They execute scholars, they massacre the Kurds who revolt because they want to restore the Muslim rule. He bans the printing of the Quran in the 1950s and the like. But the Muslims, they keep going, they keep teaching the Quran, they keep teaching Hadith, they keep believing in Allah. All these Turks had to do was give up La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and they would have lived fine in comfort without any persecution. Why did they not give it up? Because there's something so dear about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and the values of Islam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's something so dear and sacred and lovely about it that none of them, they believed it was better to struggle for justice than to give it up for some temporary dunyawi gain. That's why Islam is so terrifying. There is a sheikh, we were sitting in a car and he said to me, you know Sami, Islam is a problem. I told him, astaghfirullah, taqillah sheikh. He told me, wallahi, Islam is a problem. I told him, taqillah, a'udhu billah, astaghfirullah, stop it. He said, listen to me first. I said, go and tell me, how is Islam a problem? He said, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, for the first 40 years of his life, was he persecuted? Was he oppressed? What was his reputation first 40 years of his life? Sadiq, Ameen, they loved him, they spoiled him, they would leave their goods with him, he was honored, they used to go to him to mediate between different problems. They loved him, they celebrated him wherever he went. When did they have a problem with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam? When he stood up and said, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, stop burying your daughters alive. Give your neighbors their justice. Free your slaves. Stop cheating each other in the market. When he stood up for justice, that's when the problem came. That's when the struggle came. Ibadallah, the reason the world has a problem with Islam is not because they believe themselves to be superior. It's because Islam exposes the injustices of their way of life. And Islam demands the rights of everybody, Muslim and non-Muslim. And a world which is built on injustice is struggling to tolerate those who call for justice. The reality is what they dislike about Islam, why Islam is attacked in a way that Hinduism is not, in a way that Buddhism is not, in a way that Christianity is not, is because whereas those three religions are about the personal, spiritual, private, in their version of the Masjid where they don't go out, Islam demands you to not only be in the Masjid, but to be on the front lines of justice as well. For Ibn Taymiyyah said, Allah will preserve a kafir state that is just, but will destroy a Muslim state that is unjust. For Allah can tolerate kufr with justice, but will not tolerate Islam with injustice. And that's why Ibn Khaldun said, Al-adlu asas al-mulk, justice is the foundation of dominion. Because, and this is a promise where I finish on this point before handing over, because I know people want to do Q&A. What if I was to say to you that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not live to see Quds liberated? He did not live to see da'wah being given in English. He did not live to see Islam in Texas, in Yeehaw, Rodeo, Texas. Did he need to? Does that mean he failed? Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Why do you believe that he didn't fail despite finishing his life only controlling an Arabian peninsula that the Romans and Persians didn't think was worth conquering? It's because the magnificence of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not entirely in the material achievements he achieved in his life, but in the spirit he left behind of the ummah that said never give up, never stop moving, never stop mobilizing. When the world is against you, you keep moving. When the odds are against you, you keep moving. When you fail in your efforts, you get back up and you keep moving. When you trip over, you get up and you keep moving. Because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to us, Allah is in charge of the outcome, the honor is in the striving and being the vehicle. How terrifying it must be to see an ummah that no matter what the odds are against it, because it loves Allah and Rasul, it is willing to give up all the comforts of the world to establish justice on this earth. That's why Islam is so terrifying. That's why Islam is a problem, and may it always be a problem, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, brother Sami. I want you to have the honor to for the sister to say Sha'ada, so go ahead. Make her say Sha'ada, inshallah.
Where is she? We say
they have a microphone.
she ready, inshallah?
Yeah, go ahead. Tell her to repeat after you.
I don't know what your customs are here, but it's Arabic first, then English, right?
Yeah.
And you guys do the one time or the 3 times?
One time.
Very good. To make sure. MashaAllah. First of all, sister, Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I want to highlight first and foremost that one who enters Islam by their choice, in my opinion, is superior than the one born into Islam. And I tell you why. The one who enters Islam by choice enters Islam knowing that they are stepping away from a life that they've known. Sorry about that.
It's from upstairs, from down.
They recognize Allah and His Prophet ﷺ so sincerely and so certainly that they are ready to step out from a way of life that the only way of life they knew to enter a way of life that they know is the haqq and the truth. And they know that when they take that step, they know there will be unique struggles, but they say because they love Allah and the Prophet, they are ready to go through those struggles. Sister, if you repeat after me. Ashhadu.
Ashhadu.
An la ilaha.
Allah illallah.
Illallah. وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Sister, welcome to a beautiful, beautiful family. And I'm humbled. I was born into Islam, and I had the luxury of an environment where everything was conducive to worship Islam. Believe me when I say this, you are better than most people in this room, because you saw the haqq for what it is, you took that step, and Allah entered your heart and the love for the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and you recognized and you were willing to take that step for the truth, and that is something admirable, a bravery that not many people can boast about. MashaAllah, Tabarakallah, welcome to this family. May Allah make your path easy, and may He make you a shining example to the rest of this ummah that shows that no matter how much the ummah suffers, the ummah continues to grow, because the ummah is rooted not in tanks or armies, but in justice and truth that you recognize with that pure heart of yours. Barakallahu feeki, brothers, we have a new sister. Take Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Bismillah, mashallah. That's it, hug her, hug her. Hug her tightly, mashallah, that's your sister. MashaAllah. And for those of you who want to really appreciate what it means when someone takes the Shahada, Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anhu was the man sent by Quraysh to bring the Muslims back from Habasha. Don't you think it's magnificent that that same Amr ibn al-As is the one who said that one day I believed myself to be the dearest person to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam because of the way that he used to treat me. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in his capacity as a Muslim, as a mercy, made somebody who once fought against the Muslims feel like the dearest person to him. Of course, Amr ibn al-As makes the mistake of asking Rasulullah. He says to me, "Ya Rasulullah, who is the dearest person to you?" He says, "Aisha." So Amr ibn al-As says, okay, amongst the men. He said, "Abuha," her father. And he says, after her father, he says, "Umar." And he realized he's not in the top 10. But the reason I mentioned that hadith, ya ibadallah, is so that you're aware that those who enter Islam, remember how we treat them. Remember the way the Prophet ﷺ used to treat the Sahaba. He used to treat them in such a way, he made them feel like the most valued of individuals. That not only did they embrace him and Islam, they carried it to Egypt, they carried it to Iraq, they carried it to Sham. Khalid ibn Walid defeated the Muslims in Uhud and ended up carrying it elsewhere. Becoming Muslim and carrying it. But why? Because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ created an environment that embraced them and brought them in. Ibadallah, be gentle and merciful. Do not be hard of heart. And I will say one thing. I saw an interview about somebody giving his version of when he became Muslim. And he said he noticed that in the beginning, everybody kept telling him, this is haram, this is haram, this is haram, this is haram, this is haram. Until he got to a point where he said, you know what, maybe I should go out of Islam and then come back to it when I'm in my 50s and 60s. Because these guys are all about haram. He says the reason that he embraced Islam was that he bumped into somebody who taught him how to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he said, when I learned who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was, and I grew to love Allah, I naturally gave up what Allah hated. Not because someone told me to, but because I loved Allah so much, I did not want to upset Allah by continuing to do those. Ibadallah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down his first ayah, Iqra, he didn't send down his first ayah and say you will all burn in Jahannam, or give up alcohol, or give up. Allah in his hikmah chose to give you a message of love and establish the relationship between you and Allah, where Allah says within Iqra, get to know me, understand who I am, and you'll realize that Allah, out of the 99 names, he said, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. The word Muntaqim is not used in it. The word Al-Qawi Al-Jabbar is not used in Fatiha, because Allah had decided in his hikmah that the attribute he wanted you to associate most with him in every salat was the most gracious and the most merciful, so that you might know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a Lord that wants to make your life easy, not a being that wants to punish you. MashaAllah, mabruk, tabarakallah. It's a very moving thing to see somebody take the Shahada.
Jazakallahu khair. When I open the floor for question, if you have few questions, go ahead. Bismillah. 1, 2, 3, 4.
You have to choose one though. Yeah.
You want to use the mic? Yeah, come here and ask the question. That doesn't go. It's linked there. Yeah, come here. Oh, come here. Yes. Yeah.
I've been listening to you for quite some time.
I'm very sorry about that.
And I'm really, this is a good, I knew about that you coming here yesterday, so it was a very good and a pleasant surprise that you showed up here. I know I listened to most of your talks. I have, if you don't mind, just two questions very quickly. You mentioned about what we can do and the stuff that we can do, and I have been saying this for almost 20 years, and that we should, as Muslims, be proactive and not wait for something like Gaza to happen, and we should be planning ahead. Unfortunately, our Muslim ulama, they seem to be at least 50 years behind to react to some of the atrocities in the Muslim country. So the point is, I've been calling, I'm not going to say fatwa because I'm not a mufti, I've been calling for a movement where Muslims have to boycott Hajj and Umrah. as a way to protest against the atrocity that has been happening in the Saudi Arabia, especially for the past 5 to 7 years, by killing the ulama, jailing ulama. And now we are evident in front of us how the Saudis are siding with the Israelis. We know the history of the Saudis and the Wahhabis. There's no doubt about it. They are, I'm not going to lecture people about this, but this is one point. And this is a very passive thing we can do. It's not going to cost a lot of people a lot of money. Actually, it's going to save you some money. And it's not, you are not, carrying arms. It's not going to be a movement that is not peaceful. And imagine that all the Muslims for the next 2 years will boycott, Umrah and Hajj. I think that will send a message. That's one point. I know you had one of the videos calling for that, similar, but I'm just paraphrasing, but which I agree 100%. I agree about this for the past 20 years. The other question I have is that most of, if not the vast majority of the Islamic movement that had liberated lands of Muslims came from movements like Ash'aris or Sufis, mainly Sufis. For example, Jazair, Abdul Hamid bin Badis, he's a Sufi, all the Sufi. And none ever, and I challenge everybody here to prove me wrong, there was not a single hero or a leader or a single Salafi movement through the Islamic history. I'm talking about the new Salafis. I'm not talking about Ahmad ibn Hanbal, that had ever liberated an inch of Islamic land. Actually, the majority of them actually are Sufis or Maturidis. Muhammad al-Fatih is Maturidi. Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi is a Sufi who's a sympathizer with Ash'aris, so on and so forth. Even the most recent ones that we have in Iraq, in Al-Fallujah, they were a Naqshbandiyya movement, which is a Sufi movement that started the revolt against the American forces. I think this, so.
Go ahead, brief answer, brother.
I think that with the first issue with regards to Hajj and Umrah, there are two things here. The reason why I don't encourage boycott is for two reasons. The first is Prophet ﷺ wanted to do Umrah when Mecca was under the control of the Quraysh. The second thing is, I don't know how many of you guys, because I know here you have, your branding is excellent. So you branded handball as football. But when I say football, I'm actually talking about a game that uses the feet, like kicks the ball with the feet. Soccer. So for those of you who follow it, you'll know that the Ballon d'Or winner last year was Karim Benzema. Karim Benzema, when he won the Ballon d'Or, the Saudis, they invited him to come and play in Riyadh. He rejected Riyadh, but he decided to play in Jeddah. He gave an interview to The Athletic where they asked him, why did you go and play in Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia? He said, I'm a Muslim and I chose Jeddah because I wanted to be close to Mecca and Medina. When the interview came out, Bin Salman's Twitter army was so angry and so upset. They said, Benzema does not understand why he's been brought to this country. He was brought for Vision 2030, not Mecca and Medina. And what is he saying? That all Saudi Arabia has is Mecca and Medina. Why is he not celebrating the rest of the policy Vision 2030? When I saw how upset they were that somebody celebrated Mecca and Medina, in my opinion, Muslims should keep going just to zkara fihum, just to make them feel even worse that for all their Vision 20 concerts, Hajj and Umrah are still way more important. More people go to Mecca and Medina than they go to watch, Shakira or Iggy Azalea. I do think there is some hikmah in this verse, so I'm very cautious about the boycott. The second point is, I understand why people dislike Al Saud. What I will say is that King Abdul Aziz Al Saud was a haven for the scholars who were persecuted by the Italians in Libya, who were kicked out by Ataturk in Turkey. And King Abdul Aziz, when people say backed by the British, Sharif Hussein was backed by the British. Abdul Aziz goes and takes over Saudi, gets to the Iraqi border, and then the British panic and warn him not to cross the Iraqi border. Abdul Aziz is on record as sending aid to a lot of the Sufi movements that you mentioned. to help them in their liberation movements as well. And he was very generous in providing that assistance as well. Umar al-Mukhtar is also on record as having said that Abdul Aziz is sincere in this as well, of the Libyan movement as well. So I would say that while I understand the Sufi Salafi debate, I do also think that it doesn't add to what is necessary at this particular moment in time. And I understand why people are angry at some of the internal debates that take place. But also, having said that, I will caveat. I'm the kind of person who listens to a debate on Tawassul and go, guys, like, did Arsenal win against Chelsea though? Like, I'm the kind of guy who listens to it, and you know, but guys like Ibrahim alayhi salam said, you know, رَبِّ اجْعَلْنِي مُقِيمَ الصَّلَاةِ وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي. Can I say that? Like, just, and you know, alhamdulillah, be done with it. They're like, but are you saying Tawassul is haram? I said, I'm not saying, all I ask about Arsenal, and I ask, can I make a dua like Ibrahim alayhi salam? I'm not in anything else. So, I think it's true, but I think that, you know, all these historical details is worth a debate, but in this particular instance, it's...
Okay, but let me... Sorry, brother.
Yeah, but I'm just...
Brother, we don't want to go
I think it has been
debate.
Salman.
Wait, brother, we have to give justice to the sister. The sister want to have a question also. Go ahead, ask your question, sister.
Alaikum.
Assalam rahmatullah.
First, I want to welcome you in Texas.
Jazakallah.
And I want to request that next time you consider allocating special time for the youth.
Inshallah.
And I want to ask you to say a word for us, the moms. Our kids are going to college, to high school. What do you advise us in times like this?
So, Buna Muhammad says, the poet from Canada, he says a nice line that I used to like. He goes, I'm not a scholar or a preacher, I'm just a regular dude who makes mistakes too, but I can't talk about me without talking about you. Was my accent good? In any case. The point is that we all have shared experiences. The most dominant presence in my life was my mother, Zubaydah bint Ammar. I am a grown man with kids, and I have to message my mother when my plane is about to take off and when I land. And if I do not, she does not talk to me for 2 days. I am the kind of person who my mom insists that I have to call her every day, even when I'm abroad. Or if I drive from Houston to Texas, to Dallas, I have to tell her when I leave, and I have to tell her when I get there. My mother is always a very dominant player in my life and the source of great inspiration. My mother's the kind of woman who, she'll enter a city and she'll see 5 problems. And she won't leave the city until she fixes all 5 problems. I tell her, Yamma, ish dakhlik? Like, why are you getting involved in affairs that have nothing to do with you? She tells me, Sami, you, why are you talking to your mother like this? You know your mother, she carries you 9 months. Ma, please avoid it. Please, like, don't get involved in this. And she'll resolve that. She'll go to see a land dispute. So you are fighting over how many hectares? 2 hectares. Okay. Why don't you give it to him like just as a... You already have 20 and he has 5. Give him 2 hectares. What does it cost? What business is it of yours? Allah sent me. You know, like, why is it, you know what? Yeah, ma, like, my mother will go and, for example, when we were in high school, she would, before the school starts, she would get the books for the year for the curriculum and she would memorize the curriculum. She would learn it to make sure that after Fajr at 6 a.m. in the morning, she would sit and make me go through the curriculum. I tell her, Ma, like, why can't I go like the other kids go play football? Like, Sami! We do it. A lot of kids are going to high school, to college or university. For us, college is the 2 years before university. So when people say college, I always think little kids, but apparently for you guys it's big kids. It's the kids going to university. University is a rough time for students. I always used to say that when you go to university, you either come out non-Muslim or you come out Muslim. There's no in between. You know, like, you're always under pressure. Your identity is always under pressure, like non-stop. Even when I played for my football team, and I remember when I traveled with them, it was like, oh, your prayer sounds nice. Oh, it's really lovely you pray. Oh, you think you're better than us. Oh, why do you have to always do it like this? Oh, no. And you're just like, whoa. I remember reading The Road to Mecca. Here's a good pin. Put The Road to Mecca, Muhammad Asad, in his hands or her hands before they go to uni. I'll tell you why. True story. So my father came to me. My father, like, his relationship with me is like, you know, we talk and everything, but you can feel it's like a general and lieutenant, you know, like. So my father one day had the book and he put it in my hand, he went, read it. I said, Hadar Baba, okay. So I read the book Road to Mecca by Muhammad Asad. Anyway, I came across an instance. He's in Jerusalem and he meets a farmer, and he's not Muslim yet, he's still a Jewish journalist. So he meets a farmer who's missing a few teeth and and the farmer is praying. So Muhammad Asad wants to wind him up. So he says to him, what use does your Lord have for these actions that you do in your prayers? Why can't you be like the sophisticated Buddhists where they focus on the spirituality, where they clear their hearts and where they focus on what's internal? And he says, the farmer sitting on the floor looks at him and goes, Allah created body and soul, right? And Muhammad Asad says, yes. So how does it make sense to worship with half and leave the other half? When I went to uni in my first year, I was praying in front of the football team by a tree before the match starts. They said, Sami, like prayers are well and nice and stuff, but like why don't you guys do like the Hindus or like the Buddhists, like the in your heart, And I didn't know how to respond. So I went, Allah created body and soul, right? How does it make sense to worship with only half? I didn't understand the argument very well, but I just said it, repeated it. And the whole team went, that's true, Yeah. No, really. The book empowered me, really, it gave me so many arguments. So for example, even when I went through uni, Muhammad Asad has a quote in his book, it's not Muslims that make Islam great, it's Islam that makes the Muslims great. When Islam was the inspiration for Muslims to take action, Allah gave them glory. But when Muslims relegated Islam to rituals and habits, Allah took away that glory. So I would go to university and I'd be like, I read Muhammad Asad's book. Allah will humiliate me if I just stay with the rituals. I need to go out and tell people, this is guys, football team, come on, man. No alcohol in this room. What do you mean no alcohol in this room? Guys, come on. And you'd feel the pressure. But Muhammad Asad will give you that confidence to do so. To answer your question shortly, make sure he sends you a message when he's leaving, and he sends you a message when he arrives. And punish him if he doesn't. Always be part of his life. And the second point, put the book Road to Mecca in his hand. And when your son or daughter buckles in university, give them space to come home. Give them a reset button. Don't make it so they find comfort in another environment that will lead them astray. Lambast them, shout at them, rebuke them. But at the same time, Allah said to the Prophet ﷺ, وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَنْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. If you were hard and hard of heart, they would have fled from you. So punish them and rebuke them. Like my mother, for example, would never let us sleep while she's angry. So eventually it developed into a custom where we just developed that. At night time, we always knew she was ready to forgive us. She'd never sleep on it. She used to say, if I sleep angry with you and I die, Jannah, you will not smell it. Huh? And you will be like, if I am unhappy with you, Sami, and we grew to be, but later on, as we grow older, we realize that, your mother ended up your best friend. That your friends would go out elsewhere, but your mother ended up your best friend. And the kids will realize that later on. But what I mean when I say leave a haven, so when they do something wrong, lambast them, but leave that room where you're lambasting them in the comfort of your home. And lambasting them with a way back. And lambasting them with an avenue back. And may Allah make it easy. My wife says to me sometimes, I have 2 kids now, my wife says to me, how can we make sure that they don't make mistakes? I said, look, wallahi, Allah says everybody will face their fitna on their own. And we all went through high school, guys, right? There were situations where not even our parents, they weren't with us. And the choice was ours, whether we fall into the fitna or not, right? I always argue that the best thing a parent can do is prepare the individual to face the fitna as much as you can, by reminding them of Allah, by giving them avenues, by trying to train them ways. But ultimately the choice will be theirs. But one thing that I always loved about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that Allah in Surah Ghafir, He says, وَقِهِمُ السَّيِّئَاتِ وَمَنْ تَقِ السَّيِّئَاتِ يَوْمَئِذٍ فَقَدْ رَحِمْتَهُ. And Allah erased their sins. The angels are saying to Allah, for the one whose sins you've erased, they have got the greatest of victory. فَوْزًا فَذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. This is the greatest victory. And I always find it fascinating that Allah gave the greatest victory, not to the perfect Muslim, but to the Muslim who made the mistake, repented and got back up. Sometimes as an ummah, I feel we are harsh on ourselves, but merciful to those who perhaps don't deserve that mercy. Sometimes we lambast and rebuke, and we lambast somebody for making a mistake, but remember that mercy part at the end when they come back. And a mother is always full of mercy, mashallah, anyway. I hope some of that made sense, but in any case.
Jazakallah khair. Go ahead, brother. Short question, short answer, inshallah.
Bismillah, short answer, yalla.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
So you mentioned that Gaza is causing an awakening. 3 facts and then I'll ask the questions. Still the top 100 defense companies, 3 are Muslim. 95% of the capital in the world is nothing to do with the Muslims, although we are 25% of the population. And except for Al Jazeera, we don't know each other's stories. Like I go to Sarajevo, I can see, we can connect. Istanbul, you can connect. Baku, I'm from Lahore, Pakistan.
Inshallah.
So the things that are happening with Imran Khan, people don't know. I faced it anyway. So how would this pressure actually translate into actions? What are some tangible things that will start a process that actually causes us to be somewhere with these things? Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you.
The short answer to this question. Everybody has a unique set of capabilities and is put in a unique set of environment where Allah will see what they use their powers in that environment to advance the cause. And I'll tell you an anecdote, even though anecdotes are bad form, but it's the only way I know how to answer this question. One day I sat in my home, for 3 months I was depressed, I sat at home. My wife, she came to me, she said to me, Sami, what's wrong with you? You keep moping and sitting in the room, and is it because Arsenal keep losing? I told her, no, it's not because of Arsenal. I said to her, you know, Sumaya, I'm a man of fitna. She goes, what do you mean you're a man of fitna? I said, my job is just politics. You know, Bin Salman's doing this, Bin Zayed's doing this, Erdogan do this, Biden do this. I don't unite the ummah, I divide the ummah. You know, like when I say Bin Salman's de-Islamizing, people, they respond, they say, but we want to do Umrah, don't cause instability in Saudi. I told her, Sumaya, I'm Sami, Fattan, Hamdi. She goes to me, calm down. Like. Anyway, one day she came to me with an idea. She said to me, Sami, you know, you keep saying that the revival of the ummah comes from reconnecting the memories of the ummah. That's my theory. I'm not saying that I'm right. I told her, what's your point? She goes, I got an idea how we can do a project to reconnect memories of the ummah. I told her, what's this project? She brought me a laptop, PowerPoint presentation, and she said to me, the Muslim market is worth $250 billion. They're currently 8% of the world travel market. What if we took people to these places around the world and we showed them what the ummah looks like? I told her, Sumaya, I know my ummah. They're not ambitious. They're humiliated for a reason. When they go holiday, they only go Morocco, Turkey, Malaysia, or Dubai. They're not ambitious, my ummah. She said to me, Sami, like, but honest, I told her, I know my ummah, I love them, but I know why Allah put them in this situation. It's because my ummah believes in being insular. They don't go out. 2 weeks later, I read an article about when Netflix went to Blockbuster. And they said that Netflix was going to be the next big thing, and Blockbuster said it's not going to be the next big thing. Sumaya came to me 2 days after I read this article, and she gave me the presentation again. She said, Sami, I promise you, this is the way forward for Muslims at least to open their eyes and whatever. Now, I didn't want to be Blockbuster. So I thought, even though I don't understand her idea, I don't want it to be said I was Blockbuster. So I said, Bismillah, let's do it. Tawakkal Allah. I have no idea what you're talking about or whether it's going to succeed or not, but let's just do it. 2 years later, we had like a list of destinations: Bosnia, Barbados, Turkey, and Spain, and Uzbekistan, and Korea, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore. So I decided my wife said to me, go and take your first group. In the beginning, I didn't want to do the groups because I was worried people recognize me from the Bin Salman videos and the like. So I was like, I didn't want to put the company in trouble. Because, for example, I'll do a video, you know, saying Bin Salman is banning the loudspeakers. I'll get private messages from Mashayikh, Barakallahu feek for doing it, but we can't support you publicly because I want to do Umrah and Hajj. And we get Muslims saying, Barakallahu feek, but I don't want to talk too much about it. I don't mind the Shakira concerts as long as I can make dua in Medina. So I used to be like, I don't want to cause problems for my wife's company. My wife came to me and she said to me, Sami, I need you to take this group to Sarajevo in July. I told her, are you sure? She said, so I went, 16 people. I'm very nervous. I've got to take them through, like whatever. First day, they did the rafting and that kind of thing. Second day, we went to see Srebrenica. Third day, they went to Ghazi Huzur Bey. Here's an example. They entered Ghazi Huzur Bey Masjid in Sarajevo. Now, I thought they were going to stay in the masjid for 1 hour and then come out. I said, this is my turn to have a break, to sit down, relax, leg over leg by the fountain, drink my tea and watch them enjoy Ghazi Huzur Bey. Now, Ghazi Huzur Bey Masjid is not the most beautiful masjid. It's not the greatest architecture. It's lovely. It's just that Istanbul has nicer mosques. So when the group came out after 2 minutes, the guide next to me was like to me, whoa, they were quick. And I said, I think I know what the problem is. He said, what do you mean? I said, watch. I said, guys, do you guys know where you are? They're like, yeah, it's nice. We took some pictures for Instagram. I said, guys, in 1532, a man stood right here where you guys are standing. And he made dua. He said, Ya Allah, I have no children to come after me. And Ya Allah, I'm worried about the day of judgment. So I have built this waqf. I've built a masjid, a madrasa, and a library. And Allah, please accept this waqf for me, Yawm al-Qiyamah, and accept it from me, Ya Rabb. In the 1600s, the Ottomans are kicked out by the Austro-Hungarians. Mosque is destroyed here, mosque is destroyed here. That mosque is intact. Yugoslavian kingdom comes about. They close down this masjid, they close down this masjid, they leave this masjid, it's untouched. The communist regime comes about. They shut down the mosque in Mostar and Konjic, they destroy this one, whatever. This mosque is untouched. The Serbians come and they commit genocide, they surround Sarajevo, they start shooting at the mosques. That minaret is destroyed, this minaret is destroyed, Ghazi Huzur Bey is untouched. I told them, Ya Ibadallah, would you not say this waqf was accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? They went back in 1 hour and a half, they didn't come out. At the end of the tour, there's this girl from New York, she started crying. And I thought maybe my jokes went a bit too far. So I was like, they're going to write a bad review, Sumayya's going to kill me, this is my first time taking a tour and whatever. And I said to her, did I do something wrong? Whatever it is, I'm really, really sorry. Like, she goes, no, I'm not crying because of what you said. I'm crying that I lived 33 years of my life and I never knew how my ummah suffered here. Not only that, what I learned, because you were saying, what can we do? I'm telling you about you things within my capacity, because I'm not a tech guy. There are things tech people can do that I can't do, and they know what the opportunities are. When we started taking people to Muslim countries, my wife was much more ambitious. She said, I want to take them to non-Muslim countries, so their presence can be da'wah, and maybe we can transform the economy. I told her, Sumayya, I know my ummah are not ambitious. My ummah will not go to these places. I know my ummah. I love them, but they're humiliated for a reason. Because they don't go out. Islam inspires them to go in, not out. So she said to me, anyway, regardless, I've emailed Barbados and they've invited us to travel to Barbados to explore it. Allah. We sit with the tourism board. What will it take to get Muslims to come? Halal meat. What's halal meat? Halal meat is food. So where can we get it from? We have Brazil like near. So if we order halal meat, Muslims will come. Well, like your hotel is kind of, we can just call Hilton and say, for this month, use halal meat because Muslims are coming. Really, is that easy? Yeah, of course. What else do you need? Well, all your beaches are bikini beaches. So you want a beach without bikini beach? Okay, we'll shut off this part and make it families. No, what else? What else do we need to get Muslims? I was like, subhanallah, I thought they hated Muslims. They're the ones. Korea said that we introduced Halal Week every November. Halal Week lasts for 1 month. In that month, 40% of restaurants in Seoul, about 40%, they substitute haram meat for halal meat. Why? The Koreans calculated that's the month where thousands and thousands of Muslims come to Korea. And they said these Muslims, when they come, they spend money. And they eat, Allah barak. We're very good with food. We innovate in restaurants and cafes. We don't innovate in Timberlands or shoes. When I need Timberlands, I can't find a Muslim equivalent. And when I need shirts other than Marks and Spencer, I can't find. And the reason why is because the father doesn't want to tell his brother that when his daughter is a surgeon, he doesn't want to tell people my son makes shoes. That pride gets in the way of my boycott of Israel. I'm trying to boycott, but I can't find the equivalent shoes because somebody is feeling too much pride because he doesn't want to tell his brother. Even when the Prophet ﷺ told him that Allah loves the hand that gets rizq, he responds and he says, Ya Rasulullah, okay, I understand that, but I love the hand that gets his rizq through engineering, law, and medicine. But Allah loves the hand. I know Allah loves it, but I want something Allah loves and my brother loves. Astaghfirullah, 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 astaghfirullah. I should be careful how I put these things. Astaghfirullah. The reason I tell you this example, when I saw Korea, the way they are going, Spain, for those who don't know, Spain, one of the things that they noticed is that, you know the cathedral, where they converted the mosque to the cathedral? They noticed that even after they converted into a cathedral, the number one visitors are Muslims. So you'll pay the imam to give you a tour, and then the imam that evening has to take the cash, and he does what's called the walk of shame. He has to go to the priest's house, and he has to drop the cash off at the priest's house. Then COVID came. When COVID came, you had to go cashless with cards. So the church, they threw the Christian sink at the council. And they said, no, because now the imam doesn't have to do the walk of shame, and now nothing's by cash and whatever. Anyway, Spanish Tourism Board invited us. We gave a presentation last year in the World Halal Summit. We said that the Muslim market now is $320 billion. It's 11% of the world travel market. And what Ertugrul in these series showed is that when Muslims are exposed to stories, they will go out and explore the cities related to the stories. So for example, Suud in 3 hours from Istanbul, before Ertuğrul had only one hotel and didn't have a taxi infrastructure. The Turks were shocked that Muslims were landing in Istanbul, driving 3 hours in the morning to Sugut just to see Ertuğrul's capital. And they're like, why this? Do you know what Sugut is? It's a rundown town. They were like, for the Muslim, it's the Ertuğrul's capital. Now when you go to Sugut, 10 hotels, they've renovated Ertuğrul's tomb, they do a changing of the guard with the Alps, and there's a taxi infrastructure, and you can stay there for 2-3 nights, because they realize that Muslims, when they want to reconnect with their identity, they're willing to spend money to do so. So we argued that the next stage of Muslim travel is not nation branding, it's city branding. The same way the English person goes to Paris for 6 days, the Muslim might go to Bukhara for 6 days and say that's a holiday. I'm in the middle of Bukhara. They might go to Samarkand they might go for Ghana. We can do it, and Cordoba is well positioned for that because it was the capital of Andalusia. They said, are you sure Muslims would come to Cordoba and spend, because when Muslims say they went to Andalusia, they mean 1 day Sevilla, 1 day Cordoba, 2 days Granada, and then they go to Madrid. So they fill up gas in Cordoba and say, I went to Cordoba. We were like, we think we could do it. They sent us all expense paid to Cordoba. They showed us all over Cordoba, all the halal restaurants, all the sites. They said, just come up with an itinerary to get Muslims to come. The reason I'm telling you this story is, based on me and my wife's abilities and talents and knowledge that Allah has given us, the limited knowledge, we felt that our contribution to the ummah is in the politics and in the tourism. In Sarajevo, there is a hotel that is all halal by the place where they do the Winter Olympics. It's owned by a Christian Serb. They did an interview with him. They said, why are you a Christian Serb and you made your hotel all halal? And he said, because all my clients are Muslims. But here's the final story I'll tell you about this, about the power of the Muslim when they realize that where they choose to do their holidays makes a difference in the market. When we reintroduced our third Bosnia itinerary, we were invited by USAID and the Sarajevo and the Bosnia Tourism Board to go and explore new parts of Bosnia. They said, why are your itineraries everything between Sarajevo and Mostar? We were like, because we don't have the resources to explore everywhere else and your infrastructure is not great. They said, we will fly out and pay everything and go with you 1,000 kilometers across Western Bosnia and show you what Bosnia has to offer. When they sent the list, they included the city of Banja Luka. Banja Luka is the Bosnian Serb capital, 18 mosques in 1993. They destroyed all 18 mosques. They turned them into garbage dumps. And then when the smell got so bad, they turned them into parking lots so they could say, we're always stepping over Islam. I said to Sumaya, over my dead body, I'm going Banja Luka. No way, and this is last year by the way, no way Sumaya, I will not dishonor my Bosnian brothers and sisters by going to Banja Luka. Abadan, and I'm not going. She was like, okay, stop your exaggeration please. She said, let's just go see it, we won't spend the night there. Sumaya, I'm not going, no, just go. And then the guy from USAID said to me, Sami, please, just look at it and then go. And I was like, and then Sumaya was like, enough now, and I said, Hafidh. Because we all know our wives are, mashallah. In any case, as we're approaching Banja Luka, I'm going towards it and I'm going, astaghfirullah, 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 astaghfirullah. We approach Banja Luka, first thing you see is a minaret. And I'm going, Allah? First thing you see is minaret. The car stopped by the Farhadiya Masjid and I'm looking, it's a full-fledged masjid. I enter, and as you can probably tell, I'm somebody who puts their foot in it sometimes. So I walked in, the Imam said, Salaam alaikum. I went, what are you doing here? Why are you here? He goes, what do you mean? This is Banja Luka. He goes, so what? What's this doing here? And he said to me, okay, brother, lahda. He said, in 2002, I was a 22-year-old Imam, and the Bosniak community gathered funds together. Why? Because their grief was so great that they had driven the Bosniaks from Banja Luka and destroyed the Masjid. They believed we cannot face Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam if we die and don't restore these Masjid. So they gathered money and they sent me as a 22-year-old Imam to Banja Luka with the sole purpose of rebuilding all 18 Masjid. I said, but how did the Serbs let you? He said, they didn't. Initially, they resisted us and they threatened us. So one guy in the community came up with an idea. He said, guys, why don't we go to the UNESCO office and ask them what do we need to do to get it UNESCO protected? UNESCO said you need 90% of original materials. So we went back to the Bosniak community. We raised money and we bought all 18 parking lots. And we dug the materials out of the parking lots. And we built the Masjid brick by brick to the exact architectural dimensions that they were built before. And we got them UNESCO protected, and we just finished building our madrasa, and we're about to finish our 18th masjid. He said, because Mladic said he would kick Islam and the masajid out of these areas, we told him no one turns off the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This ummah comes back and it strives to rebuild it. He said, we all got together, we even had help from Christians in Ireland, they sent money to rebuild it as well. And yes, there was resistance, but we stayed here and Islam here. He said, did you notice when you entered the city, what's the first thing you saw? I told him, wallahi, the first thing I saw was the minaret. He said, Mladic may have massacred and committed a genocide, but can you say that he won? No, he didn't win, because we are here, Sami, he said. I went, wallah, I'm a jahil. Wallah, I'm an idiot. I will bring Muslims to Banja Luka. We will come to this place. Wallah, I'll bring them here. I'll tell everybody go. I'll bring the Muslim market here. And then as I walked out and I calmed down, I said, but what if I bring Muslims here and something happens to them? And as if Allah heard me. Not as if Allah always hears. My wife is walking, she was hijab and abaya. A woman grabs her in the street like this randomly, goes, excuse me, and I went, and she goes, where are you from? And my wife says, I'm half Algerian, half English. She says, we have a joke about Mother Teresa in Algeria. And she tells some joke about God, Mother Teresa, alcohol, and whatever. It was a funny joke, but I can't remember it. And then she says, by the way, I just want to let you know, you're welcome here. Welcome to Banja Luka. And I went. And then as I walked past the boulevard, there were huge protests against the racist Serbian leader, Dodik. And I said, Ya Allah, say no more. Message received. I'm including Banja Luka on the itineraries. The short answer to your question is, I believe that in my capacity and my wife's capacity, this is how we contribute to the ummah. I believe I do it by telling people this is what's happening in the ummah with Imran Khan being imprisoned for no other reason than they're scared he's going to win the election. And if he wins the election, then Pakistan might actually become a country that serves its people, not a minority elite establishment. They're terrified of the Pakistani people and they put him in prison. I believe that my role is to shout on the microphone, Ya Ibadallah, bin Salman is bringing Iggy Azalea to twerk in Riyadh. Ya Ibadallah, like beware, don't listen to these ulama who are telling you, just lower your gaze and go and make dua. I told Ya Ibad, imagine if Umar ibn Khattab received news that a governor was hosting a rave. Well, how do you think Umar Khattab would react? I always imagine he'd grab the person by the collar and drag him out of the palace and tell him, of course I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but my wife believes that her role, alhamdulillah, I'm part of it as well, is to reconnect the memories of the ummah, to tell Muslims, Ya Ibadallah, don't go for the safe destinations. Choose carefully where you're going to go for your destination. For wallahi, you might think you're only going for a vacation or holiday, but everybody is watching you and they are saying, how can I make your life easier? Uzbekistan tourism, do you know what they said to us? They were like, so my wife gave a talk with Bank of Indonesia, and the Uzbekistan tourism ambassador was there and said, you can do tours to Uzbekistan. My job is to help people like you. How did I not know you were doing it? What can I do? So anyway, we ended up advising the Ministry of Tourism. And they said, what do you think we could do to bring more Muslims to Uzbekistan? Because in 2016, a new president came, he lifted the ban on children in mosques, he lifted the ban on hijab, he lifted the ban on... And I was like, you guys have something that many Muslim countries don't have. Do an Islamic Golden Age tour from Tashkent all the way to Hiva. And one guy said to me privately, he went, Sami, I'm a practicing Muslim, but please remember, we're just shaking off the shackles of Soviet Russia. If we're going to go down this road, we have to convince the president that it's a financial reason, not a religious reason, so that there's no backlash from Moscow. I said, how can we do that? He said, if we can get more Muslims to come to Uzbekistan, then the numbers won't lie. We can just say, no, it's not that we're turning away from Russia, it's just that the market is so huge that we want to capitalize on it and re-Islamize Uzbekistan for this reason. I said, so if I tell people to go to Uzbekistan for their holidays, we can, he goes, exactly. Ibadallah, don't go to wherever you're going. Everyone fly to Tashkent. Everyone go, Ya Ibad. Whoever doesn't go, may Allah humiliate him. Whoever doesn't go, whatever. Sami, you can't make dua on Muslims like that. Okay, but I'll find another way to tell them. Ya Ibadallah, go to these countries. You make a difference. Your money makes a difference. The short answer to your question is, you know your abilities. You know your environment. You know things I don't know. You know your skills better than I do. I have determined that my skills are in the politics and in the travel industry. I'm going back to London for a week to speak at the Muslim travel show, to tell Muslims to fear Allah and to go to the Balkans. And when Muslims tell me they went to Switzerland, I'm like, why put your money in an economy that hates you when you could have put it in Bosnia, where it's the same views as Switzerland, but it's all halal and it's much cheaper? Like, go, your money makes a difference. Because when I see non-Muslim tourism boards come and say to me, we're ready to use halal meat, we're ready to do all halal hotels, we're ready to make sure halals don't sell alcohol, if it means that we get a chunk of this $320 billion market, that's 11%, that's the fastest growing market. And then I come to America and somebody tells me, but brother, the ummah is weak. I tell them, Akhi, I know you're weak, but don't project that on the ummah. Because I've seen the ummah. The ummah is strong. You're the miserable wretch. But wallah, go outside, see the ummah. You'll find it's very strong. You're detached from the ummah. Go reconnect with it, Akhi. You're the one in dalal, not the ones you look down on. Barakallahu feekum.
Barakallahu khair. I want to give to the kid. Come here. Say your name, okay?
My name, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
My name is Raifi. I had a question. I know that the Houthis are blocking trade in the Red Sea. I wanted to know how is that affecting Egypt and what is Egypt doing about it?
Oh, who raised this boy? Oh. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. I worry about an ummah that ignored the Yemenis for 9 years when they said to you that the Houthis have plunged our country into war for the 7th time, because they believe that if all Yemenis come to a consensus about a ruler, it is still haram, because in Islamic law only the Houthi family is allowed to rule Yemen because they are Ahl al-Bayt. I worry about an ummah where the Iraqis called out for 15 years to say we're being massacred by pro-Iran militias who are unfurling banners that say we're taking revenge for Hussein, as if somehow they're the ones who killed al-Hussein. Even though, you know, when you read the history, I'm just saying, for those interested in doing history, if you read Ali ibn Abi Talib's Nahj al-Balagha, radiallahu anhu, Ali ibn Abi Talib says something about those who claim to love him that condemns them. He says to them, Wallahi, I wish I had never met you. He said, I tell you, march with me in the day, you march with me in the summer, you tell me it's too hot. I tell you, march with me in the winter, you tell me it's too cold. Wallahi, if Muawiyah were to give me one of his men for 10 of you, I would gladly trade. The reason his son Al-Hasan radiallahu anhu abdicated to Muawiyah is because when Al-Hasan marched out with his army to fight Muawiyah, he heard these people who claimed to love him, he heard them behind him starting to curse Sahaba and bickering between themselves. And the story goes that he looked at his army and said, you know what, I can never defeat Muawiyah with an army like these people. So he went to Muawiyah and made a deal in which he would abdicate and give Muawiyah the Khilafah, and Muawiyah would give it to him afterwards. But Al-Hasan died before Muawiyah, and Al-Hussein insisted that the agreement was not between two men, it was between two clans. And Muawiyah said it wasn't between two clans, it was between two men. I made a deal with Al-Hasan, not with the family of Al-Hasan. And that's when the differences emerge. When you're asking about the Houthis, there's an Arabic saying which is, Inna fi qalbi inna. That it's when you see something that while you appreciate on the surface it's good, but in your heart is deep, deep unease. Because I appreciate that the Iranian proxies have made a difference for Palestine. I appreciate that they've put pressure on Israel. I appreciate that when the Palestinians were abandoned, they at least did something. I understand and I respect when the Houthis say that if you claim we're doing this for show, then why don't you put on a show as well? I appreciate when a BBC presenter in Arabic speaks with the passion as if she's a Zionist, where she says, why are you getting involved in Palestine? You're so far from Palestine. And Muhammad Ali al-Houthi turns around and says, and what's Biden doing? What, he lives in the flat next to Netanyahu? Macron lives in the same apartment building. What are they doing, Israel, if you're telling us that we're far away? I appreciate that, yes, at least they're doing something. I also appreciate that they're doing it because they genuinely love Palestine. I've met Houthis. I have very good friends who are Houthis. Not something you should say publicly, but in any case. I know a lot of their spokespeople. I interview them for an Arabic TV channel. I know that they are sincere in their love for Palestine. But that blind sincerity in ideological ties has seen them massacre more Sunnis than Israel has massacred Palestinians. When Qasim Soleimani, the Iranian general who was killed by Trump in 2019, when they were in Syria, he used to add a clause to the ceasefire agreements, whereby he would agree to a ceasefire in certain areas, but on the condition that Sunnis would be loaded onto buses and sent to the north, and Shia from the north be brought to the south, because he wanted to create a Shia bridge from Tehran all the way to Lebanon. I have been following Houthis since 2000 and whatever. I don't know what to make of a people who kill their own but stand up for Palestine. And I don't know what to make of it. I remember there was a meme, a funny meme, when ISIS were in Iraq. Not that ISIS were funny, but I'm saying it's a funny meme. It was, they showed a group of ISIS fighters and they said, "We are in Iraq, but our eyes are on Al-Aqsa." And they brought the Egyptian comedian Adil Imam a picture of him, like to say what the Iraqis were thinking. They were like, "Guys, you've caused us so much headache. Why don't you go to Al-Aqsa and leave your eyes on Iraq? You know, like, just go, just go, like, you know." And part of me, and I know this sounds bad to say, part of me feels that it might be better if the Houthis and stop killing Yemenis, and the Iraqi militias stop killing the Iraqis. I would prefer that they do nothing for Palestine and they stop killing the Sunnis, so that we in the Sunnah world can focus on helping Palestine. Because I promise you, and this is going to make me very sick to say, like my stomach hurts saying it. When the Saudis say that Iran is a greater threat to Saudi than Israel, politically they are absolutely correct. Name me one issue where Israel is a direct threat to Saudi Arabia. You can't name anyone. Now look at Iranian militias surrounding Saudi Arabia from the north to the east to the south. Why did you have to ask me this question? Having said that, the Houthis are doing more than what all these other nations are doing, so inna fi qalbi inna, but I don't know what to do about it. I don't know, wallah.
Okay, guys, we have 3 minutes. So, you have a question? Come, brother. It's before you.
Assalamu alaikum. So my question was along the same lines. I'm going to ask it a little differently. So you talk about the opinion change and the impact in the world because of that. But don't you think, and I do not relate to that group, whatever group it is, but if a small group can stand against a large army, like the superpower, don't you think if we can show it to the world, it's going to give us the courage, especially as Muslims? We have a lot of big countries with armies that we can also stand against those powers. That was my question. The second question is personal. You can choose not to answer. Did Saudi Arabia already ban you or not?
I think that your question links very similar back to the question that you asked earlier, which is that now there's a shift in public opinion. What can we do that will set us on a route, to liberate Palestine or the like? The reality is that I think that there is a maxim in football, soccer. So sometimes you have 90 minutes in the game, right? And there are certain sections of the game where you just move the ball to see what the other side is going to do. Does their fullback come forward too much? Do the midfielders press? Are they sitting deep? Are they whatever? The reason why I say that is sometimes, even if you can't see the road in front of you, keep moving so that you open up opportunities that you didn't know were there before. And the reason why I say that is that the ummah is an ummah that should always be moving, even if it can't see the outcome. And the proof is that Allah in the Quran says that the Rasul and the Sahaba, زُلْزِلُوا حَتَّى يَقُولَ رَسُولَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ مَتَى نَصْرُ اللَّهِ, that they were shaken until the Prophet and the Sahaba would say, when is the victory of Allah coming? Which means, according to their analysis of the day, they couldn't see where victory would come from. That didn't stop them from moving. The reason why I gave you the example of things that me and my wife do is to say to you that while I don't have the powers that I wish I had, I believe I'm trying to deploy the powers that I do have in the hope that I will either get greater power, or I will inspire somebody with greater power, or I will create for myself a platform or opportunity through which to deploy greater power. It's not necessarily these are the end games, but this is the only way I know how to move the ball, how to move, in the hope that it will eventually create an opportunity. And the best example I can give is, when the Gaza broke out, for 3 days I sat depressed in my house. My wife said to me, "Sami, Saraha, you're becoming useless. You're not helping with the dishes, you're not helping with the hoover. Either get up and go record a video, or come and help me." And I said, "I'll go record a video." So anyway, when I recorded the video, Thinking Muslim Podcast called me for an interview. I did Thinking Muslim Podcast. When I did that, Yaqeen called me for the interview. When I did Yaqeen, I got invited to America. When I did my first tour, I got invited on a second tour, then a third tour, and then suddenly people are talking about how can we punish Biden and abandon Biden. Allah took me from here to here. I did one movement, Allah sent me 10 levels up. Allah brought the efforts of different individuals together. If someone told you 4 months ago, there's a random guy in London called Sami, who's going to sit in front of you in Irving Masjid. You'd have said, like, what's the hikmah behind it? Like, what's the use of it? But Allah meant that I moved in London, you moved here, and we ended up together. Allah ties those efforts together. But there's nothing to tie if the efforts aren't already there, which is why we keep moving. The Houthis move in their own way. They created, opportunities in the Red Sea, and they put pressure on Egypt, and they put pressure on Biden, or the like, or the like. I'm moving in one way, and I ended up here. You're moving another way, you ended up here. I'm here in America. The UK guys are telling me, why are you always in America, not in the UK? I told them, because these guys can actually punish Biden, while you guys are still bickering between yourselves. I'd rather be where I feel useful than to come there and listen to the bickering that's taking place in London. Truthfully. Alhamdulillah. That's why the answer to your question when it comes to, is it worth a small army to... Don't think about it in those terms. Think about that. Now that Gaza has taught you that maybe you do actually have more power than you think you have, let's talk about how we can deploy that power. Sami's complaining that he can't buy Timberlands because they support the Zionists. We need a shoe company that makes good quality shoes. Sami is wearing these turtle tops because all his shirts are Marks and Spencer because he couldn't find the Muslim equivalent. Somebody please make shirts so I can buy the shirts. Then in 10 years' time when you become a mega business and we need funding for institutions, I no longer have to ask only the doctors, lawyers, and engineers. I can ask the businessmen across a whole range of industry, just like the Zionists, when they're able to pool money from all industries, we're no longer pooling from a little, well, we're pooling from a sea of money that's available to us because we built power in the ummah, because we plugged those holes. For me, this is jihad fi sabilillah. When I say, what's your strategy for November to punish Genocide Joe? Again, the views expressed by the speaker or the speaker's own have nothing to do with the organization that invited me, and they didn't ask me what I was going to say. What's our strategy for November? Have we gathered the data of the areas where we know we can punish, the candidates? Do we know the areas where we can vote? Do we know the margin of difference? Do we know how many votes we need? Do we know how many Muslims are registered? Do we know that there's an area in Texas where the deciding vote between the candidates was 1,500 votes? But there were 4,000 Muslims that didn't vote, which meant those Muslims could have decided who won and who lost. And the candidate who won was the one who supported the genocide, while the candidate who lost is the one calling for a ceasefire. And because we were sitting at home sleeping, saying we don't want to use that power, we didn't recognize it. And then we ask ourselves later, why don't our representatives care about us? You don't even move, Yahi. You don't even use the power. You don't even put the effort in. Have we calculated the data where we can make a difference? Because it's true, I tell people to punish Genocide Joe. But do you know that if you're really organized and you gather the data, you could punish Genocide Joe and make sure Trump doesn't win the House? You could get the perfect scenario. Because there's data that, but have you got that data? The Zionists have the data already. For those of you in areas where you can't make a difference, have you decided to gather money to send some people to help those in Michigan to make a difference? Because mashallah, you guys have resources. I've seen your houses, mashallah. You know, when I went back to London after seeing the houses in Texas, Sumaya said to me, welcome home. I told her, Sumaya, I feel claustrophobic. You know, like, when by the time we get to like April, what's our plan? You know, I always say, let's get the data for March. Let's get the resources ready by June. Let's get the training for the messaging and the hashtags by August. You know, I'll tell you a story. Somebody said to me, Sami, I don't have followers on TikTok or social media or the like. I can't make a difference. Let me tell you a story about an interesting individual. During the Turkish elections, I received a message from this particular individual. They said, Sami, I want to do something because everybody is against Erdogan. I want to do my part. I want to do a video. Can I send you a script? And can you check the script? And can you tell me if it's okay or not? I was like, okay. They sent the script. Now, I don't know, I didn't feel that I knew this person quite well, but I didn't feel like our relationship was one in which I could tell this person my honest opinion. So I was like, you know what, let me just give them a pat on the back and say, well done for the effort. It looks good. Bismillah. And they replied and they said, this feels like one of those pat on the back. Tawakkal Allah, Bismillah. Can you tell me what you honestly think about the script? I was like, Alhamdulillah, it's good. They were like, Inna fi qalbi inna. There is something in this good that I don't like. Please, I beg you, give me your honest opinion. I said, the script is rubbish. You've said in 5 lines what you could have said in 1. Your main point is buried in the middle of 4 different points. You use no rhetorical devices like rule of 3. The ummah is not weak. The ummah is not bleak. The ummah is not... This is called pounding the message into the people. You need to use these rhetorical devices. You have 10 seconds to win 30 seconds. You have 30 seconds to win a minute. You have a minute to win 2 minutes because people scroll very fast. Anyway, we worked on the script. 3 days later, they published it on their social media platforms. They don't have a large following. They got 350,000 views within 2 days across all social media platforms. The communications department of their country hired them immediately after that video. The point that I'm saying is, between June and July and August, do we have like these training programs ready where people are ready to, how to convey the message and deliver the message? When September comes, are we ready for the information blitz in case the ummah forgets that a genocide happens? Are we ready for that information blitz the way the Zionists will do? Are we ready? Do we have the hashtags ready? Have we thought about these things? In November, are we ready to, what happens after Biden loses? When those 4 years of difficulty come, the 4 years of ijaf, like Yusuf alayhi salam, the 4 years of tough, once we win that victory and we topple a sitting US president, do we know what we're doing afterwards? How we're going to entrench those institutions? The ummah loves to give charity, even though the Prophet ﷺ said the hand that gets its rizq is better. The reason that we make it like this is because we don't trust our ummah with our investment. The Zionists invest 10 times in a failure because they know on the 11th time he creates Google. The Zionists invest 14 times in a failure because on the 15th time they'll create Meta. We invest 1 time and we tell the whole community, guys, don't invest in this guy, he's a loser. Don't invest in him. He wasted 100,000 of my investment. He's like, dude, it was the first attempt. I don't care, it was 100,000. These people remind me when Khalid ibn Walid was sent by the Prophet ﷺ to an area, he transgressed against a tribe. And the Prophet ﷺ raised his hands in the air and he said, Allahumma inni abra'u ilayka mimma fa'ala Khalid. Allah, I'm innocent of what Khalid has done. When I read the hadith, what came to mind? I said, the Prophet ﷺ sent Khalid ibn Walid back into the battlefield, The ummah of today would have said, Khalid, you're cancelled. Do you know what the Prophet ﷺ said about you? You'll never lead an army again. I don't care how talented you are. You're cancelled. That's the difference between the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ and the ummah of today. Allah says in the Quran that the Sahaba, أَشِدَّاءُ عَلَى الْكُفَّارِ رُحَمَاءُ بَيْنَهُم. They are tough on the oppressors and repressors, but merciful between themselves. Sometimes I feel we're the opposite. We make no excuses for our scholars, but we give 1,000 excuses for the red pill movement. That's why I always argue, and I finish on this point, I promise. There's something that fascinates me about the Battle of Badr in the Seerah, which is when the Prophet ﷺ was marching forward, before he gets to the battlefield, he does something. He turns around to his army and he says, Ashiru alayya, advise me. Muhajirin are quiet, they're confused. It's like, he's not talking to us. The Ansar, they say, Sa'ad and Mu'adh says, Ya Rasulullah, as if you're talking to us, as if you're seeking reassurance from us. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, and if I am, and Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh says, Ya Rasulullah, we've given you our oath that we're standing with you whether you win or lose. Whether you win or lose. We've given you our oath and we're ready to go for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Prophet ﷺ continues, if even the Prophet ﷺ needed the reassurance from the Ansar, why do you look down on those who, when they have an initiative, they call on you and you say, why are you asking me? You're the one with the genius idea. Go and show us first where the victory comes from. اذهب أنت وربك فقاتلا إنها هنا قاعدون. We say to them what Bani Israel said to Musa, go you and your Lord and fight. We'll be here waiting until you show us a victory. We don't support those who lose, we want to support the winners. Without realizing that we read the seerah, we read about the Muslims being persecuted in Mecca, and then winning in Badr, losing in Uhud, existential crisis in Khandaq, and signing the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. We read the seerah and we go, MashaAllah, look at the perseverance. And then when something similar to the seerah happens in our own community, we say, ah! So you say, MashaAllah here, but you implement the opposite in your life. You say, MashaAllah on the hadith, but you do the opposite in your life. And then you ask why the ummah is unable to achieve things, even though it has the power to achieve it. Moving forward, you are asking, the question, which I've forgotten. Moving forward, Ya Ibadallah, I don't know if we will successfully punish genocide, Joe. But I know there's a chance that we might be able to do so. I don't promise you that you will succeed in what you're about to do. But I can promise you one thing. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always in control in every single second that passes on this earth. And I promise you that Allah holds the fate of the world in His hands. And I promise you Allah will never humiliate this ummah so long as it strives for what is right. And I promise you that if today we're about to make a mistake, because we're intending it in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will make sure He turns that road to the mistake to the road to that which is correct. All Allah asks of us is to move and He will handle the rest. All I'm asking you to do is try any idea that you might have. For wallahi, it may be the idea that you think won't work, that turns out to be the idea that doesn't work, but creates the opportunity and path that opens the door to a possibility we didn't consider, that turns out to be the door that leads to the success. For wallahi, up until Hudaybiyah, even after Hudaybiyah, the Prophet ﷺ did not know he would enter Mecca the following year. He had just signed a treaty for 10 years. But Allah had written that the victory was close. They couldn't see it, but it was close. And Allah rewarded them because even though they couldn't see the outcome, they kept moving. Ibadallah, we may fail miserably in November. But let me put it to you this way. It's better to live 4 years of hardship, knowing you did everything you could, than to live 4 years of hardship in humiliation that you could have done something but chose not to. I don't promise you the success. This is where I finish. I don't promise you the success. I don't promise you will succeed. But I promise you there's an opportunity. I promise you the data suggests you can do something groundbreaking. That you can do for the first time, you can punish a candidate in the way the Zionists punish candidates. I promise you that I see an opportunity for us to transform this Muslim community from a community that has no value to a community that has value. Right now when the Congress people come to visit you, in the car, they tell the secretary, what can I do to amaze? He doesn't do research. He tells the person in the car on the way to the Irving Masjid here, and he says, what can I say to wow the Muslims? And the secretary says, they have a saying, As-salama as-salamaikum. So when the Congress person comes and he stands in front of you, he says, As-salamu alaykum, everybody. And everybody goes, mashallah. You know, it's actually Assalamu alaykum. It's okay. And then he might say Mubarak Eid. And you're like, mashallah. You know, it's Eid Mubarak. But yeah, thank you very much. If the Muslims punish a sitting US president, when I, inshallah, am invited, bi'idhnillah, to come and pray Taraweeh with you next year in Ramadan, I would not be surprised if we find the congressperson praying with us in the back. I would not be surprised if a congressperson visits you the next year because you punish a sitting US president and he stands where I'm standing and he says, guys, we gotta do this together. Because as the Prophet Muhammad said, innamal amalu binniyati. I would not be surprised if you, a potential candidate here, but I would not be surprised if a congressperson comes here and maybe you're going through some struggles and he says, guys, as your Prophet Muhammad said, inna ma'al usri yusra. Why? Because he knows that you have value. But if Genocide Joe wins the second term when you could have punished him, I promise you, you'll go knocking on the door and they'll be like, excuse me, there's somebody from the Muslim community, he's here to see you. Yeah, tell him I'm not interested. But they're a community. Listen, they're a community. Biden killed 20,000 of their brethren on the side. Biden committed genocide and they still voted for him. Biden committed a genocide, but they were so scared of 4 years of discomfort in their lovely big 4-bedroom houses. Allahumma la hasad. May Allah increase you and give me one as well. The prices for your houses here, by the way, like someone showed me $350,000 can get you like a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, like a big house. A studio flat in the United Kingdom, in Wembley where I live, a studio flat, starting price is $500,000. Studio. Just so you understand why I'm so shocked about it. But may Allah increase you and increase me, inshallah, with you guys, inshallah.
Okay. So, 2 things. One is announcement that we are going to have Qiyam, inshallah. Brother Hamza you are here. So, we'll give you 10 minutes to make wudu and relax and come back for the Qiyam. And before that, we'll give our last question to our Sheikh, Dr. Siraj, inshallah. Bismillah. The last question, okay?
And short answer, inshallah. Oh, not for the Sheikh, though.
Thank you, Nuruddin. Thank you, Brother Sami. I really feel honored to be in this congregation and listen to you. You have shared your knowledge with us and you have educated us. We have a serious issue that is going on in Palestine right now. Atrocities, genocide, whatever you want to call that. My question to you is, how is the international community dealing with this situation? And number two, has the International Court of Law has any responsibility for this kind of atrocities going on? I would like to hear from you on this particular issue. This is a common question. Then the youngers will ask the elders, and finally they will ask, what is the hikmah behind what is going on in Palestine? Thank you very much.
That last part of the question. Oof. The first part about the international community. Today, David Cameron said we need an immediate ceasefire. The Finnish foreign minister from Finland said we need an immediate ceasefire. Self-defense is over. We see now that the Israelis have offered Hummus a 2-month truce, which I think if the war is going to end, it will be phased out. It won't be a ceasefire. It will be phased out gradually. It will be an extended, it will be first a pause, then extended pause, and then eventually a de facto ceasefire, because the Americans will not allow a ceasefire that recognizes Hummus. So as a result, they will make sure that they will keep a status where there is no war, but Hamas is not recognized. So that's in terms of the international community. They're moving towards the idea of we need the Israelis now to stop and cease. And I think there's heavy pressure now on the Israelis now. The second point about the International Court of Law, we see tomorrow what the ruling will be, and we have to see what the reaction of the international community will be. Netanyahu is worried. He met with his legal team today. The Americans are worried. They're debating because it seems that there will be a meeting to discuss the Geneva Convention on Genocide that Biden has been delaying. They're apparently due to meet, I think, in the next couple of weeks. Biden has been delaying, but they're insisting on doing so. The Eli Cohen, the Israeli foreign minister, went to European Union 4 days ago to meet with the 27 member states. He presented the plan for an artificial island to put the Palestinians on the artificial island. He was stunned that the 27 member states were so horrified that the EU is meeting to impose consequences on Israel for what it's doing to the Palestinians, and the Israelis are confused that we presented this great idea. Why are you guys so upset about it? The third point in terms of the hikmah behind what's happening in Palestine, and I know a lot of young people are asking that. There are 2 books that I read before Gaza happened that if I had not read them in the 2 weeks before Gaza, I would not be saying the things that I'm saying today. The first is a book about the Algerian War of Independence. So I was sitting with an Algerian guy and we were talking about why Macron never wants to apologize for what they did in France. So I said, you know what, enough complaining. I'm going to buy a book by somebody who believes the French should have stayed in Algeria. I'm going to buy a book by someone who loves colonization and read what their take is on the Algerian liberation movement. My wife said, why are you giving him royalties? I said, let him have the royalties. I just want to know why they won't apologize. He identifies 2 turning points in the Algerian liberation movement. The first, he says, was the 1920s when Sheikh Abdul Hamid bin Badis set up the Council of Islamic Scholars. He said the graduates of those schools formed the rank and file of the FLN that would emerge later. A generation that was well-versed in Quran, well-versed in Islamic tradition, and that successfully reversed the damage that France had done in terms of trying to de-Islamize Algeria and ruin the identity. The second turning point is the one relevant to your question. He said the second turning point that broke France, that meant that they were going to be kicked out, was actually the massacre of 1945, when the French, who were celebrating liberation from Nazi Germany in Europe, massacred 30,000 Algerians from Stif, Kharrata and Gelma. I was baffled that he identifies a massacre of the Muslims as the turning point for their liberation. He argues that the French were convinced, and so were the people around, that that massacre meant that Algerians would never resist again. It was such a heavy, like rivers of blood. He said that woke the Algerians up and the Ummah up, that woke them up from a slumber, that meant that the next 17 years, there was such momentum that the French were kicked out 17 years later in 1962, even though the Algerians were never at any point militarily superior to the French. He argues in his book that if the massacre of 1945 had not happened, the French could possibly have survived much longer in Algeria. So when the young people tell me that what's the hikmah behind this massacre, it's true I'm uncomfortable with the framing of it as hikmah in death. Even though I understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا. Don't consider those who've been killed for the sake of Allah as dead. They are alive with Allah, already happy. No punishment of the grave, no limbo, no waiting for the book, whether it's in the right or the left, no waiting or crossing the sirat, no watching the angels debate, he did bad deeds, he did good deeds, none of that. Straight to Jannah with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no pain, no bums, no nothing. Allah says, I've sorted them out. You will suffer the punishment of the grave if you die. They will never have to taste it. Allah said, I've spared them that. But also, I feel like those who ask the question don't study their history. And that's why I point to this idea of the 1945 massacre. And I think that when you look at Gaza and the great awakening that is happening and the shift in public opinion, because one of the things that he describes in this book is that during that decade after the massacre, the global public opinion was also shifting. America was becoming a superpower and wanted to see the British fail. They wanted to see the French fail. They wanted to see the Italians fail. The global powers were no longer helping each other. The same way we're seeing China, Russia, and all Europe and US all falling out with each other. It resembles very similar to the decade of when Algeria was liberated. And that's why when I read that book and I saw what happened in Gaza, I saw the parallels immediately. So when the Ummah was saying this is a disaster, I was going, wait, I've seen this before. I've seen this before, and I know in history it ends with victory for us. The second book that I read was Surah Hud in the Quran. I was leading Salat, and I wanted to recite Surah Hud, and for some reason, even though I know it, I was making mistakes. I read 2 ayah, mistake on the 3rd. I read the 4th ayah, mistake on the 5th. Eventually I gave up, I just did ruku, Allahu Akbar. So I went back to open Surah Hud to memorize it, and I found in Surah Hud, it's the story of prophets who by your standards don't actually achieve any success. They call on their people don't believe, Allah destroys them. Hud goes, Salih goes, Shu'aib goes, Nuh goes, Lut goes. Lut even says, قَالَ لَوْ أَنَّ لِي بِكُمْ قُوَّةً أَوْ آوِي إِلَى رُكْنٍ شَدِيدٍ. If only I had a powerful ally to resist. It's a statement you're like, if only I had power, I don't have power to resist you. Nuh alayhi salam in Surah Nuh says, رَبِّ إِنِّي دَعَوْتُ قَوْمِي لَيْلًا وَنَهَارًا وَلَمْ يَزِدْهُمْ دُعَائِي إِلَّا فِرَارًا وَأَنِّي كُلَّمَا دَعَوْتُهُمْ لِتَغْفِرَ لَهُمْ جَعَلُوا أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي آذَانِهِمْ وَاسْتَغْشَوْا ثِيَابَهُمْ وَأَصَرُّوا وَاسْتَكْبَرُوا اسْتِكْبَارًا. Allah, I've called on my people day and night, and every time I call on them, they run away. And when I call on them, so you might forgive them, they put their fingers in their ears and they cover their faces. That ayah when people said to me that we keep talking about Palestine, it's not making a difference, I remembered Surah Nuh and his lamentation. When people told me, oh, I'm despairing, I don't have power to do anything, I remembered Lut alayhi salam in Surah Hud. And I said, subhanallah, people are saying the exact things that were said just before the victory comes. That's what changed my perspective, why people said, why is Sami optimistic in the midst of what's happening? It's because, ya ibadallah, what I'm seeing before me is an exact replica of what I read in the Quran and in this book on Algeria. This was exactly the situation just before the victory came. In my heart, I truly believe we are closer, and I truly believe that now the Ummah, this is great awakening happening. All I have to do, in my opinion, I just have to go to the Muslims and beg them and plead with them to see the Ummah the way I do. Beg them and plead with them to see the power that they have that Blinken fears in them. To appreciate the power that Netanyahu fears in them. To appreciate the power that they have that Israel spent billions to make sure you don't use it. And that's why for me, it's always baffling, and I finish on this point here. What bewilders me about my ummah is very powerful, and I've seen the power of my ummah. What bewilders me is how a powerful ummah believes itself to be weak. But the enemies of the ummah believe it to be so strong that to this day they're so desperate to try to repress it. It's like they're coming in and saying, beware this strong ummah. The ummah goes, whoa bro, what do you mean strong? Like, what are you talking about? Like, where's this power you guys see in us? Like, we don't let them manifest it. And that's why I think, and I always make this, it's a semi-joke, but I'm actually being serious. Sometimes I believe Blinken believes in the power of Allah more than most Muslims do. Netanyahu believes in the power of Allah more than most Muslims do. Because Netanyahu and Blinken showed that if you leave Muslims alone and give them freedom, they will achieve extraordinary things because they have Allah. Who saw that Israeli analyst on that TV who says the Muslims have a concept called sabr? And we don't have it in Hebrew, he said. Did you see it? He goes, we don't have it in Hebrew. He said the Muslims believe that because they have Allah, it doesn't matter how many of them fall along the road. They believe victory is coming because they have Allah. They don't see Allah as a substitute the way we do. They believe Allah is in the field. They believe because He's in the field, they're destined to win no matter what happens. He said, this ummah is, he's almost talking like a Muslim. He goes, you need to understand what these Muslims are like. When I saw that interview, that's when I said, Subhanallah, the non-Muslim appreciates Allah's power more than the Muslim does. He believes because Allah is in the playing field, Israel is destined to be defeated, while the Muslim is looking and saying, when is the victory of Allah coming? Why does Netanyahu and Blinken see Allah's hand, but you fail to see Allah's hand? I see it, I want you to see it, I want you to appreciate it, and may Allah give victory to us all and guide us all, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, takbir.
Allahu Akbar.
Barakallahu feek, brother Sami. May Allah bless you.
Ameen.
Bless your wife. You talk a lot about your wife.
Ameen.
Allah bless your parent.
Ameen. Ameen.
And may Allah make your resistance and sabr on us. Jazakallah khair. May Allah bless you. We are going to give you 5 minutes to make wudu, and we come back, inshallah, when we make 2 rak'ah and dua, inshallah, for our brothers and sisters in Palestine.
Barakallahu feekum. Thank you very much for tolerating the long speech. Allahu Akbar.
Allahu
Allahu
Akbar.
Akbar.
Allahu Akbar. Ameen. Barakallahu feek. Jazakallah. ما شاء الله. والله كل شيء اونلاين. اروح للويب سايت تاع نشيد تلقاه. I'll give you the link. Brother, you use this, right? Yeah. Okay, so take it. Yeah. Take this.